He opened his eyes from the blow of a boot to his ribs. Not a gentle nudge, not a careful touch, a full-force blow from an army boot to his ribs that knocked the wind out of him. Aiden rolled onto his side and buried his face in the stone floor. A sour aftertaste of yesterday's wine lingered in his mouth. His head was splitting as if someone were hammering nails into his temples from the inside. He tried to focus his eyes, but the world was spinning and blurring. Standing over him was a man in chainmail, gray-haired, broad-shouldered, with a face that hadn't known a smile in the last 20 years. General Rotar, commander of the capital's garrison, or former commander, judging by the way he looked at the prince lying there. That's how you look at a dead rat in a barn, with disgust and a slight annoyance at having to step on it. Rotar said that Aiden's father had died 8 hours ago, that the enemy would cross the border in 11 days, that the treasury was empty, that the army had deserted, that he was leaving too. Every word fell like a stone into a well. Aiden lay on the floor and listened. Not because he couldn't get up. He could. His body was young, 22 years old, 1.80 meters, dehydrated and poisoned by wine, but young. He didn't get up because his brain was working at that moment. It was working as Prince Aiden Westmark's brain had never worked before, because it wasn't his brain. 34 years of service, 10 years in the U.S. Army, Iraq, Afghanistan, 3 deployed bases in active combat zones, 2 garrisons rebuilt from ruins. Major Daniel Coe, a specialist in military logistics and infrastructure reconstruction in post-conflict zones. His last memory. A mission in Eastern Europe. The back seat of a BMW. Exhaustion after a meeting. His eyes closed for a second. A blow. Darkness. And now, a stone floor. Sour wine. A boot to the ribs. Rotar spat on the carpet, the royal carpet, in the presence of the living air. That spoke louder than any words. He turned toward the door. He paused. He called over his shoulder that Aiden wouldn't live to see the coronation. The door slammed. Silence. Aiden lay on the floor for another 3 seconds, not out of weakness. He was counting. His father was dead. 11 days. An empty treasury. A deserting army. An enemy at the border. In Afghanistan, they'd given him a ruined city in 3 weeks. Here, they'd given him an entire kingdom. So the scale was greater, but the principle was the same. Work with what you have. He stood up. The world swayed. His legs buckled. This body's liver was working like a toilet sponge from the barracks at Fort Bragg. His stomach clenched. Aiden braced himself against the wall with his hand and straightened up. He looked around. A bedroom. A large one. Stone walls. Tapestries. A fireplace. 4 empty bottles on the floor. The crown lay on the rug by the bed. A gold band set with 3 sapphires. It had simply been dropped nearby like a useless object. He bent down and picked it up. Heavy. Cold. At that moment, the air before his eyes flashed blue. Aiden recoiled. A translucent panel hung before him. Blue letters on a dark background. The crown system has been activated. National survival deadline. 11 days, 3 hours, 47 minutes. He blinked. The panel didn't disappear. He blinked again. The panel hung in the air before him, pulsing softly. Daniel reached out his hand. His fingers passed right through the glow. Not a hologram, not a screen. Something right in his field of vision. Like augmented reality, only without the glasses. A line flickered at the bottom of the panel. Subject registry, 0 entries. Crown glasses, 0. Tree of reforms, locked. Tactical overlay, locked. He stared at it for 10 seconds. Then he said one word out loud. Okay. Not surprise, not fear, not delight. He'd seen and heard enough strange things in his past life. A hangover hallucination or this world's real magical system. It didn't matter. If it worked, it worked. Aiden walked over to the mirror. A pale boy with dark circles under his eyes was staring back at him. His light hair was matted with sweat. His cheekbones were sharp. His chin was weak. His hands were thin. Not a single callus. Not a single scar. This body had never held anything heavier than a cup. He looked into his own eyes. For the first time in this body's life, there was sobriety in them. He placed the crown on the table. Not on his head. Too soon. Water first, then people. He found a pitcher on the windowsill. The water was warm and smelled of iron. He drank the entire pitcher, 1.5 liters. His stomach rebelled. Aiden doubled over. He exhaled. He held the water inside. He straightened up. Good. Step 1 is done. Now he needs to assess the situation. The memories of the former Aiden lay in Daniel's mind like a poorly organized archive. Fragments. Faces without names. Names without faces. Palace corridors. The smell of wine. His father's screams. The laughter of prostitutes. The contempt of the servants. Everything blurred and steeped in alcohol. But he could pull something out of it. The Kingdom of Westmark, a small country on the edge of the continent, between the Chiron Empire to the east and the Republic of Ulven to the south. 30 years ago, Westmark was rich. Gold, grain, the finest cavalry in the north. Then Aiden's father, King Anselm III, began to drink. He squandered wars, selling off lands. The aristocracy scattered. Peasants fled by the villageful. The garrisons stood empty. The merchant guilds openly sold information to the enemy. A classic scenario. Daniel had seen it in Iraq. He'd seen it in Afghanistan, a state that had rotted from within. The difference was that over there, he'd been rebuilding other people's bases. But here, they'd given him the whole country, and the crown to boot. He stepped out of the bedroom. The hallway was empty. No guards. No servants, no advisors. The tapestries on the walls hung crookedly. An overturned candlestick lay on the floor. The palace looked as if it had already been looted. Maybe it had been looted. Aiden walked down the hallway, counting. Rotar was gone. That meant he had no military command at his disposal. The treasury is empty. That means there's nothing to pay the soldiers with. The army has deserted, so there are no soldiers either. 11 days. 3 legions of Chiron. That's roughly 40,000 soldiers. Against an unknown number of loyal guards, if they're even loyal anymore. He stopped by the window. Below lay the capital. Gray roofs, smoke from the chimneys, narrow streets, the market square, the wall surrounding the city, old, crumbling in places. Beyond the wall, fields. Beyond the fields, the Mirna River. In 11 days, 40,000 enemies will be standing across the river. A blue panel flashed in his peripheral vision. The tactical overlay was partially available. He mentally reached for it. A map unfolded before his eyes. The capital of Westmark in the center, the Mirna River to the east, the road to the bridge, 2 villages along the way. The rest was shrouded in fog. The system showed only what Aiden's men could see. And Aiden had no men. He closed the map. He went down the stairs. He found the throne room. It was empty. The throne stood on a dais, dusty and shabby. On the armrest sat a half-empty cup of wine, his father's. Aiden walked over. He picked up the cup. He poured the wine onto the floor. He set the empty cup back down. That was his first decision as king. Not another drop. He continued his tour. The treasury. The door was open. Inside, it was a mess. The chests were empty. Papers were scattered across the floor. Someone had already taken everything they could carry. Aiden picked up a parchment. It was the crown's revenue ledger for the past year. The figures were so staggering that Daniel whistled. Tax revenues had fallen by 80% over 5 years. Meanwhile, court expenses were rising. A classic downward spiral. He'd seen this in reports from the provinces of Afghanistan. Local governors spent on themselves while the infrastructure fell apart. Only here, the governor was his father. Aiden tossed the parchment back onto the floor. All right, no money, no army, no command, no time. What does he have? He looked at his hands. Thin, pale, no calluses. He had a body, young and healthy if you didn't count his damaged liver. He had a crown, formal authority that no one had yet publicly challenged. He had a system, a mysterious, flickering thing in the corner of his vision that promised reforms and troops but demanded specific people. And he had experience. 10 years of post-conflict reconstruction, the knowledge that an army begins not with swords, but with hot meals, that loyalty is built not by orders, but by actions, that 40,000 enemies can be stopped if you find the right place and the right people. He turned toward the kitchen. The hallway led down a narrow staircase. It smelled of smoke and rancid grease. The kitchen was quiet. The stoves had cooled down. The tables were empty. In the corner, an old man in a dirty apron sat on a stool. A gray mustache, red eyes, large, calloused hands. Chef Barney Hawk. The name surfaced from the memory of the man Aiden used to be, the only cook who hadn't left, because he had nowhere else to go. Barney looked at Aiden, without respect, without fear, with the weariness of a man who hadn't been paid in 3 months and was too old to start over. Aiden asked how much he was owed. Barney replied that he personally was owed 20 silver pieces. The entire kitchen was owed 170, plus for flour, firewood, and oil, a total of about 300 silver pieces. It was pocket change by the treasury's standards. But there was no treasury. Aiden slipped a ring off his finger, a heavy gold ring bearing the Westmark coat of arms, the only thing they hadn't had time to steal. He placed the ring on the table in front of Barney. Sell it, pay the entire kitchen staff, use the rest for flour. Tomorrow at 6 in the morning, there must be 100 bowls of hot porridge in the castle courtyard, for the guards, free of charge, from the king. Barney looked at the ring, then at Aiden, then back at the ring. His lips twitched, his eyes sparkled. He didn't say a word, he just stood up, took the ring, nodded. For the first time in 10 years, someone in the palace had answered the king without contempt and without fear. The blue panel flashed. Barney Hawk added to the registry. Profession, cook. Loyalty, 15 out of 100. Unlocked. First level field kitchen, plus 8 crown points. Aiden felt it. He didn't see it. He felt it, like warmth in his chest, like the first click when a mechanism starts working. One person, one right move, one unlock. He smiled. For the first time in this body's life, the smile wasn't drunken. It's working. That means he can keep going. He left the kitchen. He went back up to the throne room. He sat down on the step by the throne. Not on the throne, on the step. He rested his elbows on his knees and began to think. 11 days. Top priority. Food. Second. People. Third. Defense. Fourth. Money. Fifth. Information. He dug up everything he could from the memory of the former Aiden. Snippets of conversations, faces at court, names. There wasn't much. A drunken brain didn't remember well. But something stuck. Treasurer Hartwin. The name evoked a vague, unpleasant feeling. Aiden dug deeper. Lord Hartwin. Fat. Always sweaty. He'd come to his father with papers. His father would sign them without looking. Hartwin would take the papers away and smile. That was enough. A treasurer who smiles when the treasury is empty. That meant there was money, just not in the treasury. Another name. Duke Morvain, uncle. Or rather, his father's cousin. Polite. Cold. He'd visit once a month. He'd talk with Hartwin behind closed doors. Once, the old Aiden overheard them by accident. The word Chiron, the word readiness, the word regent. That's enough too. Traitor. The third name, Sira Voss, captain of the guard, a young woman with the face of a stone statue, the only officer who hadn't fled. The former Aiden remembered her poorly because she never looked at him. Ever. As if he didn't exist. The daughter of General Voss. The very same one who died defending Anselm from the uprising 6 years ago. Her father gave his life for a drunkard on the throne. It was clear why she wouldn't look at him. Aiden stood up. Enough thinking. It was time to act. First order. He found the clerk. A boy of about 16 was dozing in the corner of the office, the only one left. Aiden woke him up. The boy jumped up and stared at the prince in horror. Aiden dictated, "A royal decree. All taxes on bread are suspended for 30 days. Signed, Aiden Westmark." The scribe stared in disbelief. His quill froze in midair. He asked again, "All taxes on bread, all of them, for 30 days." Aiden nodded. The boy began to write. The quill scratched across the parchment. The blue panel flashed. The decree was recorded, plus 12 crown points. Unlocked. The first-level field kitchen is now open. The decree amplifies the effect. Food production speed plus 20%. Aiden nodded to himself. 20 crown points in 2 hours. 1 cook and 1 decree. 11 days, 3 hours, and 47 minutes. The timer ticked. He stepped out into the courtyard. The sun hung low. Sunset. The palace courtyard was empty. Only 2 guards at the gate. 2. Out of the entire garrison. Aiden approached them. Both stood at attention. One was young, the other was old. The young one looked on with curiosity, the old one with pity. Aiden asked their names. The young one was named Lucas, the old one Mark. He asked how many guards were left. Mark replied that there had been 80 that morning. After the king's death, 60 had left. 20 remained. No, 19. Another one left an hour ago. 18 guards. Plus these 2. That makes 20. Against 40,000. Aiden nodded. He asked if they'd eaten today. Both fell silent. So, no. Aiden said there would be hot porridge tomorrow morning, for free, at 6 in the morning, for everyone who stays. Lucas blinked. Mark gave him a strange look. Neither of them answered. Aiden turned and walked back to the palace. The first day was coming to an end. The timer in the corner of his eye showed 10 days and 21 hours. He found his father's study. The door was open. Inside smelled of wine and dust. On the table lay a map of the kingdom, an old, worn one. Aiden unfolded it. Myrna. The bridge. The road. 2 mountain passes to the south. 3 villages in the valley. The capital in the center. A wall. A castle. He ran his finger across the map and calculated. Distances. Marching time. Bottlenecks. Where 40,000 become a problem for themselves. Where 2,000 can hold the crossing. If he can find 2,000, if they're armed, if they're fed, if they believe it makes sense to hold their ground. A lot of ifs. But he'd seen worse. Aiden pushed the map aside. He opened the desk drawer. Inside lay a stack of letters, unopened. He began opening them one by one. Complaints from peasants, requests from merchants, demands from the guilds. His father hadn't read a single one. Some had been lying there for over a year. Aiden read them. Every single one. He memorized every name. He took note of every problem. The morning began with the smell of porridge. Aiden woke up at 5:30. His body ached. His liver was protesting. His head was clear. He put on the first thing he found in the closet, a simple shirt and pants. No furs, no gold, no cloak. He went down to the courtyard. Barney had kept his word. In the middle of the courtyard stood 2 long tables. On them were rows of clay bowls filled with hot porridge. Steam rose into the morning air. Barney himself stood nearby in a clean apron. His 2 assistants were serving the porridge. 14 of the 20 remaining guards had come. The other 6 apparently didn't believe it. The 14 stood in a ragged line, looking at the bowls, then at Aiden, then back at the bowls. No one moved. Aiden walked over to the table. He took the first bowl. He sat down on a bench. He began to eat. The porridge was simple: barley, salt, a little oil, but it was hot. He ate in silence. After the 3rd spoonful, Lucas, that young guard from yesterday, sat down across from him. He took his bowl. Mark followed him. Then the rest. 5 minutes later, all 14 were eating. In silence. Only the clatter of spoons. The blue panel flashed. Lucas Verne added to the registry. Loyalty. 12. Mark Tolley added to the registry. Loyalty, 9. And so on. 14 names, 14 entries. Average guard loyalty, 11 out of 100. Not much. But yesterday it was 0. Aiden finished his porridge. He set down his bowl. He stood up. He looked at the guards. He spoke briefly. Whoever wants to get paid on time and eat 3 times a day should come tomorrow at 6. Whoever brings a friend gets a double portion. No questions asked, no oath, just show up and eat. He turned and walked away. Silence behind him, then whispers. He didn't look back. The first rule of working with a demoralized group: don't ask for loyalty. Give them a reason to come tomorrow. Food is a reason. He returned to his office. He laid out yesterday's letters on the table. He sorted them. 3 stacks. The first, problems that can be solved by an order. The second, problems that require money. The third, problems that require people. The stack involving money was the largest. There was no money, so he needed to find someone who had it. 2 options. First, Hartwin, the treasurer, the one who stole the treasury. He needed to find him and take the money. Second, Mei Yun, the daughter of the last merchant family in the capital. The memories of the former Aiden offered little insight. A girl, smiling. She used to come to the balls. She thought counted on her fingers. Her father was a fat, nervous, perpetually sweaty merchant named Ren Yun, the only merchant family that hadn't fled. Why hadn't they fled? That was the question. But first, Hartwin. Aiden summoned Lucas. The guard appeared 3 minutes later. Kasha worked quickly. Aiden asked if he knew where Lord Hartwin lived. Lucas replied that the treasurer had left the palace 2 days ago. He took 3 wagons loaded with chests. He said he was taking documents to his country estate. 3 wagons, with chests, documents. Aiden nodded. Hartwin's country estate was 10 miles to the west. If he was still there, if he hadn't intercepted the documents, then it must be the money. Lucas asked if he should send men. Aiden said no, not now. 6 guards wouldn't be able to stop the treasurer's carriage if he decided to flee further. They needed to take a different approach. He dismissed Lucas and walked down to the city gates. The city was waking up. Merchants were opening their shops. The streets were quiet, too quiet for a capital city. There were few people. Those who were out walked quickly with their heads down, a city bracing for the worst. Aiden walked down the street observing, not like a prince, like an officer on a reconnaissance mission. The southern wall, 3 breaches. 1 is blocked with sandbags, 2 were open. The western gate, 1 leaf wouldn't close. The hinges had rotted. The market square, half the stalls were closed. The ones that were open were charging triple the price. Flour at double the price, salt at triple the price. People buy little and grumble quietly. Aiden walked through the market and turned into a narrow alley. It smelled of sewage and rotten cabbage here. The houses stood close together. Laundry was drying between the windows. Children ran barefoot over the stones. Slums. Every city has slums. He knew this from Baghdad. It was here that those who would either stand by him or slit his throat at night lived. There was no third option. He memorized the streets. He counted the houses. He counted the people. The blue panel flashed every time he looked at someone for more than 3 seconds. She suggested adding him to the registry. He refused. It wasn't the right time. The registry is filled out through personal contact, through an action, not through a glance. He returned to the palace around noon. A woman was waiting for him in the throne room. Tall, black hair tied in a bun, chainmail over leather armor, a sword at her belt. Her face was striking. Her eyes were gray and cold as a winter lake. Sira Voss, captain of the guard. She stood upright, her hands behind her back. She looked at Aiden the way a judge looks at a defendant. She stated that she had come to submit her resignation. Aiden stopped 3 steps away from her. He looked at her. The daughter of General Voss, whose father had died defending the drunken Anselm from a rebellion 6 years ago. The only officer left in the palace. She had remained not out of loyalty, but out of a sense of duty. That duty had been fulfilled. The king was dead. Now she was free. She expected him to try to talk her out of it, or to shout, or to cry. Aiden did neither. He said he accepted her resignation. Sira blinked. For the first time during the entire conversation, something flashed across her stony face. Surprise, he continued. But before she left, he wanted to give her something back. He pulled a thin leather notebook from his belt. A diary. He'd found it one night in a drawer of his father's desk, among unopened letters. The initials were on the cover. G.V. General Voss. Aiden held out the notebook. It had been lying in his father's desk, among the things he'd never opened. Your father deserved better. Sira took the notebook. Her fingers trembled. She opened the first page. She read it. Her eyes widened. She turned the page. Another page. Then another. Her breathing changed. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Aiden remained silent. He didn't know what was written in the diary. He hadn't read it. It was personal. But from Sira's reaction, he realized there was something important in there. Sira closed the diary. She looked at Aiden. For a long time. Something was changing in her gaze, slowly, like a glacier melting millimeter by millimeter. She uttered a single word. Why? Why had he returned the diary instead of reading it and using it? Aiden shrugged. Because it's your father's tool, not mine. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Sira straightened up. She tucked the diary into her bosom. In an even voice, she announced that she was withdrawing her resignation request. Goodbye. She turned and left. The blue panel flashed brighter than usual. Sira Voss added to the registry. Profession, warrior, captain of the guard. Loyalty, 28 out of 100. Unlocked, the first king's arsenal. Location will be available at loyalty 50. Aiden stood in the empty throne room, staring at the closed door. 28 out of 100. Not 3, as the system had estimated. 28. The diary had been the right decision. He didn't know why. He just knew that his dead father's personal belongings needed to be returned to his daughter. Not because the system gives points, because it's the right thing to do. That's what matters. The system rewards actions, but actions shouldn't be for the sake of the system. Otherwise, it doesn't work. He could feel it. Just as he'd felt in Kandahar that you couldn't hand out food just for the sake of reports, only for the sake of the people. Reports come later. He left the throne room and headed for the stables. He needed a horse. Just one. An old one. Any horse that would take him to Hartvin Manor, 10 miles to the west. There was a single gelding in the stable, gray, lame in its left hind leg. The stable hand was sleeping on the hay and woke up with a start when Aiden entered. Aiden asked what the horse's name was. The stable hand mumbled that the horse's name was Dust. The others had been taken away. Aiden saddled Dust himself. His hands remembered. Not his hands. The hands of the Aiden he used to be. At least that Aiden knew how to sit in the saddle. The only useful skill he'd acquired in 22 years. He rode out of the palace alone, without guards. Lucas, standing at the gate, called after him, asking where he was going. Aiden didn't answer. The road to Hartvin's estate ran through fields, empty, unharvested. The grain was rotting on the stalk. There was no one to harvest it. The peasants had left. Aiden looked on and calculated. How much grain was being wasted? How much could be saved if the people were brought back? How many mouths could be fed? 2 hours later, he rode up to the estate. A stone house, a fence, 2 guards at the gate. Not royal guards, Hartvin's personal men. They saw a rider on a lame horse in a plain shirt and did not recognize the prince. One shouted that the estate was closed and ordered him to leave. Aiden reined in Dust. He dismounted. He stepped closer. He identified himself. The guards exchanged glances. One ran inside. 5 minutes later, Hartwin emerged, the Lord Treasurer, fat, sweaty. His small eyes darted about like mice in a trap. He hadn't expected a visit, especially not from Aiden, especially not without an entourage. Hartwin began to speak, at length and quickly. Condolences on his father's death. The documents had been in danger, and he'd moved them to safety. The treasury was empty through no fault of his own. His predecessor. War. A poor harvest. Aiden listened. He did the math. 3 wagons full of chests. You don't need chests for documents, you need them for gold. 2 personal guards at the gate. Not government officials. Personal guards. Hartwin is nervous. He's sweating more than usual. His left eye is twitching. Classic. Aiden had seen dozens like this in Iraq. Local officials who embezzled aid and smiled at the inspectors. He cut Hartwin off. Said he wanted to inspect the chests, personally, right now. Hartwin turned pale. Started saying it was impossible, that the documents were sealed, that an order from the council was needed. Aiden stepped forward, right up close. So close that Hartwin recoiled. He spoke quietly and evenly. The council has been dissolved. His father is dead. He is the sole heir. The crown is on his head. And if the treasurer doesn't open the chests right now, in an hour 20 guards will arrive in this courtyard with the authority to search and arrest. The square in front of the palace was packed with people. Not because they'd been summoned, because rumors in a small town travel faster than horses. Barney the cook told the butcher told the baker told his wife told her neighbor. By noon, the entire capital knew 2 things. The new king had abolished the bread tax, and the new king had arrested Treasurer Hartwain and was taking him to trial. People came to watch, not out of love, out of curiosity. The sponge prince, the drunken pup, the very one who couldn't walk down a hallway without holding onto the wall. He had arrested the Lord, all by himself, without an army. It was so unbelievable that people wanted to see it with their own eyes. Aiden rode into the square on dust. Behind him were 3 wagons loaded with chests. Hartwin followed the wagons, his hands bound. The crowd parted. Silence. No shouts, no greetings, just eyes. Hundreds of eyes fixed on one man. Aiden dismounted. He climbed the palace steps. He turned to face the crowd. He was silent for 5 seconds. 10. The silence was oppressive. Then he spoke. Not a shout, not a speech, just a loud, steady voice. 3 days ago, this man took the crown's gold out of the palace. 12,000 gold pieces. That's 2 years' worth of the garrison's pay. That's 6 months' worth of bread for the capital. That's medicine for a hospital that doesn't exist. That's walls that haven't been repaired. That's soldiers who left because they weren't paid. The crowd listened. Hartwin was on his knees. His face was ashen. His lips were trembling. Aiden continued. His father had allowed this. His father didn't read the papers, didn't check the accounts, didn't ask where the money was going. It was his father's fault. And his fault, too, because for 22 years he had been blind and deaf. But his father was dead, and his blindness was over. A pause. He looked at Hartwin, then at the crowd. Under Westmark's laws, embezzlement of public funds is punishable by death. He has no intention of changing the law. Hartwin screamed. He began to beg, to name names, to say he wasn't alone, that more wine was involved, that everyone knew. Aiden raised his hand. Hartwin fell silent. He would remember those names. More wine, he remembered. But right now, the trial was about one man. Aiden nodded to Sire. She stood nearby on the steps, silent, sword drawn. Her face was stony, but there was something new in her eyes. Focus. She looked at Aiden the way one looks at a person they're seeing for the first time, even though they've known them for years. Hartwin died quickly. One blow. Sira knew her craft. The body was removed. Blood stained the stones of the square. Aiden ordered one chest to be opened right there, on the steps. Gold glinted in the sun. The crowd gasped. He announced, the families of soldiers who had left the garrison over the past year were entitled to their unpaid wages. Come tomorrow to the palace gates with your husband's name or son. Collect what is owed to you. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then a voice rang out from the crowd. An old voice. A woman's voice. Hoarse. "Long live the king." One voice. Then a second. A third. Not the roar of the crowd. Not a storm. A trickle. A thin trickle that begins with a single stone dislodged from its place. The blue panel erupted with numbers. Plus 340 crown points. The capital's average loyalty rose from 8 to 22. 17 new entries in the registry. Unlocked. Level 1 garrison. Ability to hire guards for a salary. Maximum strength, 50. Aiden stood on the steps and looked out at the square. In the crowd, he noticed a pale face. A man in a dark cloak. He stood in the shadows by the wall. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't looking at the gold. He was looking at Aiden. His eyes were narrowed. His lips were pressed together. Then he turned and disappeared into an alley. A spy. Morvena's. Or Chiron's. Or both. It didn't matter. What mattered was that now they knew. The drunken puppy had woken up. Aiden walked down the steps. He gave an order to Sira. "Double the guard at the gates. Keep a roll call of the new guards. Hot meals 3 times a day for everyone." Sira nodded, without a word, without sarcasm. She just nodded. He headed for the commercial district. The Yoon family's house stood on the corner of the main shopping street. 3 stories, stone, once wealthy. Now the facade was peeling. 2 storefronts were boarded up. The third was open, but there was little merchandise. Aiden walked in without knocking. The sales floor smelled of dust and spices. Behind the counter stood a heavy-set man with shifty eyes. Ren Yoon, head of the trading house. He saw Aiden and turned pale. Then he flushed. Then he turned pale again. He began bowing so low that he nearly hit his forehead on the counter. Aiden asked him to stop. He said he'd come on business, not as a king to a subject, but as a customer to a supplier. Ren Yoon straightened up. His eyes stopped darting around. Business interests overcame his fear. A young woman emerged from behind a shelf behind the counter. She wasn't tall. Dark hair down to her shoulders, a round face, a smile that turned on and off like a light switch. Mei Yun, Ren's daughter, 19 years old. She looked at Aiden with an expression he recognized immediately, the way an accountant looks at a new client. Assessment, calculation. How much does it cost? How much can be charged? Aiden laid out his proposal. He would grant the Yoon house a 5-year monopoly on military supplies to Westmark. Weapons, provisions, equipment, everything through the Yoons. In return, the Yoon house would issue a loan to the crown in the amount of 4,000 gold pieces. Immediately. Ren Yoon opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. 4,000 gold pieces. For a dying trading house, that's a huge sum. But a 5-year monopoly on military supplies is a fortune. If there's an army, if there's a kingdom, if there's anyone to supply. Ren began to say that it was a risk, that Chiron was at the border, that no one believes it. Mei tugged at her father's sleeve. He fell silent. She turned to Aiden. She asked 3 questions. First, does the crown have a defense plan for the Mirren Bridge? Second, is there an engineer capable of building fortifications in a week? Third, does the crown guarantee repayment of the loan from Aiden's personal funds in the event of Westmark's fall? Aiden replied, yes, yes, no. He wouldn't lie. If Westmark fell, there would be neither personal funds nor Aiden. She was taking the same risk as he was. Mei smiled. A genuine smile, not a forced one. A warm, genuine smile that broke through her businesslike expression for a second. She said they had a deal. Ren Yun staggered. He grabbed the counter. He muttered that his daughter would drive him to his grave before Chiron did. Mei ignored her father. She pulled a thick book from under the counter. She opened it. She began to count. Her pen flew across the pages. She counted faster than Daniel had ever seen any accountant at the Pentagon do. 10 minutes later, a list lay before Aiden. What could be bought with 4,000 gold pieces? Weapons. 200 sets of infantry gear at 10 gold pieces each. Provisions for 1,000 men for a month, 1,200 gold pieces. Horses, 20 head, 400 gold pieces. Tools for engineering work, 300 gold pieces. Balance, contingency fund. Aiden looked at the list. Accurate, well thought out, taking into account current market prices and delivery logistics. 19 years. The blue panel flashed. Mei Yun added to the registry. Profession, merchant, financier. Loyalty, 30 out of 100, plus 2,400 crown points. Aiden showed no surprise at the figure. 2,400 for a single deal. The system valued economic decisions highly. He took the list, thanked her, turned toward the exit. Mei called out to him at the door. She said quietly that she knew where Rotar had gone, the general who had kicked him with his boot. He hadn't deserted. He was in the village of Croft, 20 miles to the north, gathering a militia, on his own, without orders. Because he believes the king is hopeless, but the country isn't yet. Aiden stopped. He turned around. He asked how she knew. Mei replied that the Yun trading house knows everything that happens within a 50-mile radius. That's their job. He nodded. He went outside. He stopped on the street. Rotar, the general who spat on the carpet and walked out. He's gathering a militia, on his own, without pay, without orders, because he loves the country more than he hates the king. You can't let people like that slip away. But first, the engineer. Without walls and fortifications, any militia is just a mob with sticks against 3 legions. Aiden knew where to look. The memory of the former Aiden suggested a fragment. Master Crest, a builder, banished by Anselm for some offense, or a supposed offense. It's hard to say. His drunken mind didn't remember well, but Crest had left, and his daughter remained. Eden Crest. His memory suggested only one thing: quiet, taciturn, somewhere in the city. He found her 2 hours later. He asked the merchants, at the blacksmiths, from an old man at the market. Everyone knew who Eden Crest was, the daughter of the master builder whom the king had banished. No one knew exactly where she lived, or didn't want to say. Finally, a laundress on the outskirts pointed him in the right direction. A workshop at the back of Weapon Street. A small house, half ruined. The door was unlocked. Aiden went inside. A room, just one. A table, a chair, a bed, and blueprints. Everywhere. On the walls, on the table, on the floor, on the bed. Hundreds of blueprints. Walls, towers, bridges, catapults, siege weapons, water supply systems, drainage channels. Everything was drawn precisely and in detail, with calculations, with dimensions, with notes in the margins. Daniel looked at them and recognized the hand of an engineer, a real engineer, not an amateur, a professional who had been drawing into the void for years because no one commissioned him and no one was watching. A young woman was sitting at the table, 23 years old, thin, dark hair cut short. Her hands were stained with ink. Her eyes were large and wary. She looked at Aiden without fear, without deference, with incomprehension, the way a cat looks at a stranger who has entered its home. Aiden didn't introduce himself. He didn't give his name. He walked over to the wall. He looked at the drawing. A bridge, fortified, with towers on either side, with a lifting mechanism. He asked what kind of stone she had in mind for the piers. Eden blinked. No one had ever asked her about the stone for the piers. She answered automatically. Granite from the northern quarries. But river stone would work too if reinforced with mortar mixed with ash. Aiden nodded. He pointed to another drawing. A catapult. An unusual design. A long lever, a double counterweight. He asked what the range was. Aiden stood up from the table. She walked over. She replied that, with proper calibration, it could reach up to 1,000 paces. That's 3 times the standard range. Thanks to the double counterweight and the extended lever. She pointed to the calculations, formulas, angles, masses. Aiden listened. He nodded. He understood. Not everything, but enough. She was a genius. A quiet, forgotten genius who used to sketch catapults on the walls of her poverty-stricken room. He pulled a bundle from his belt. He unwrapped it. Old blueprints. He'd found them that morning in his father's study, in the same drawer as Voss's diary. The blueprints were signed Master Crest. These were his father's last works before his exile. Fortifications for the Mernsky Bridge, unfinished. He placed the blueprints on the table next to her own. Your father started this project. You can finish it. The crown will pay for the materials, the workers, the tools, and it will restore the name Crest to the Register of Royal Master Craftsmen, officially. With apologies. Aiden looked at her father's blueprints. She ran her finger along the lines. She recognized his hand. Her breath caught. She said nothing. Silently, she sat down at the table. She picked up a quill and began to draw. She didn't look up. She didn't ask about payment. She didn't ask about deadlines. She just started working. An hour later, a plan for fortifying the Mernsky Bridge lay on the table. 2 towers, 3 walls, a moat filled with water, a drawbridge, 2 cross-3 catapults, positions for archers, fallback lines for the infantry. Everything included calculations for manpower and materials. 90 workers, 7 days, 400 gold pieces for stone and wood. Aiden looked at the plan and, for the first time in 2 days, felt something resembling hope. Not the hope of a drunken boy. The hope of an officer who had assessed a position and realized it could be held. The blue panel flashed. Aiden Crest added to the registry. Profession, engineer. Loyalty, 25 out of 100. Unlocked. Crest 3 catapults. Dawn flooded the workshop with golden light. Eden kept drawing without looking up. Aiden found an old teapot on the shelf. He lit a fire in the small stove. He brewed tea from the dried herbs sitting on the windowsill. He set the cup down next to the drawings. Eden didn't look up, but her hand froze for a second. Then she continued drawing. She picked up the cup 10 minutes later, took a sip. Didn't say thank you, but the corner of her mouth twitched. A loud crash shattered the silence. Something fell onto the roof, then a rustle, then a body flew through the window, small, dirty, with a knife in her hand. A child of about 14, a girl, a sharp-featured face, short, tangled hair, tattered clothes. Her eyes were wild. She landed on the floor, rolled over, and leaped to her feet with the knife pointed at Aiden. She declared that she wanted to see the new king. She looked, not impressed. Aiden jumped up from the table. The road to Croft ran through the forest. An old, dark forest. The trees stood so thickly that the sun barely filtered through the canopy. Dust fell in a steady, measured rhythm. Aiden sat in the saddle, lost in thought. Rotar, the general who spat on the carpet and walked out. May said he was raising a militia, on his own, without orders. That suggested 2 things. First, Rotar believes Westmark is worth defending. Second, Rotar doesn't believe Aiden is capable of defending it. Both points could be used. The first as motivation, the second as a challenge. In Iraq, Daniel had worked with a dozen men like that. Officers who hated the chain of command but loved their soldiers. You can't order them around. You can only convince them or impress them. Croft showed up 4 hours later. The village. 30 houses, a well, a blacksmith shop, a fence made of sharpened stakes. New, you could tell by the fresh wood. Rotor hadn't wasted any time. 2 men with axes stood by the fence. Not soldiers, peasants. But they stood at attention, shoulders squared. They were looking straight ahead. Someone had already started training them. Aiden rode up to the fence. The men crossed their axes, blocking his path. One asked who he was and what he wanted. Aiden identified himself. The younger one spat into the dust. The second, a sturdier and older man, looked more closely. He was silent for a moment. Then he walked behind the fence. 5 minutes later, Rotor appeared. The general hadn't changed. The same chainmail, the same face that had forgotten how to smile, the same eyes that looked at him as if he were a dead rat. He stopped 3 paces from the fence and silently stared at Aidan, who was sitting on a lame horse. Aidan dismounted. He tied Dust to a post. He walked up to the fence. He said he hadn't come to give orders. He'd come to make a proposal. Rotor crossed his arms over his chest. He asked what a drunken boy with no army, no treasury, and no brains could possibly propose. Aidan replied calmly, "I do have a treasury. I recovered 12,000 gold pieces from Hartwin. There will be an army. An engineer is drawing up plans for fortifications at the Mernsky Bridge. I do have a brain. Hartwin has been executed. The bread tax has been abolished. The guards have been fed." Rotor blinked. Once. It was the equivalent of surprise on his face. He asked who had executed Hartwin. Aidan replied that it was Sir Voss, on his orders, in the square, in public. Rotor was silent for a moment. Then he asked how many men Aidan had. Aidan didn't lie. 22 guards, 2 of Hartwin's former men, 32 child scouts, 1 lame horse, 1 old cook, 1 young scribe, 1 19-year-old finance officer, 1 23-year-old engineer. And in 11 days, there would be 40,000 enemies at the border. Rotor looked at him for a long time. Then he did something Aidan hadn't expected. He smiled, for the first time, with one corner of his mouth. He asked what Aidan's plan was. Aidan explained. The bridge over the Myrna, the only crossing for 30 miles in either direction. A bottleneck. 3 legions cannot cross at the same time. A maximum of 300 at a time. If the bridge is fortified on the west side with 2 towers and a wall, 200 defenders could hold the crossing against 1,000. The Cross 3 catapults have a range of 1,000 paces. This would allow them to bombard the enemy camp on the other bank even before the assault begins. We need infantry, 200 men at least. Better yet, 500. Ideally, 1,000. Men from Rotar's militia. How many are there? Rotar replied. 113. Peasants, former soldiers, blacksmiths, hunters, poorly armed, 20 swords, 40 spears. The rest are axes and pitchforks. But their spirit is strong. They're angry. They fear for their families. They're ready to fight. Aidan nodded. 113 plus 22 guards. 135. Not enough. We need more. But we have a base. He offered Rotar a title, an official one. Commander-in-Chief of the Westmark. A salary, authority, freedom in tactical decisions. One condition. Obedience to the king's strategic orders. Rotar was silent. He looked at Aidan. His eyes searched the young king's face for something. Signs of drunkenness, signs of cowardice, signs of a lie. He found none. He asked one last question. What would happen if they couldn't hold the bridge? If Chiron broke through? If the capital fell? What then? Would Aidan flee? Aidan replied that he would not. He would stand on the bridge, the last one. Because the bridge begins with the king and ends with the king. If the bridge falls, he will fall with it. Silence. Rotar unfastened the clasp on his scabbard. He drew his sword from his belt. He laid it on the ground before Aidan. He knelt on one knee. He recited the oath, words Aidan did not know, but the body of the former Aidan remembered. Old words, heavy as stone and sharp as steel. The blue panel flashed. General Rotar added to the registry. Profession, commander. Loyalty, 35 out of 100. Unlocked, level 1 army. Maximum size, 500. Ability to form units. Ability to appoint commanders. Plus 400 crown points. Aidan picked up Rotar's sword. He returned it to the general. He said he had no intention of carrying someone else's. He'd earn his own sword if he survived. Rotar took the sword back. He stood up. For the first time, he looked at Aidan not as a rat, but as a human being. Perhaps even as a commander. They spent 3 hours at Croft. Aidan walked among the militia, shaking each man's hand and asking each one his name, where they were from, whether they had a family. Rotar walked beside him and watched in silence. Aidan knew what he was doing. It wasn't a show. It was what 10 years of service had taught him. A soldier doesn't fight for a flag. A soldier fights for the man who knows his name. 113 names. 113 entries in the registry. The militia's average loyalty rating, 18 out of 100. Low, but enough to ensure they'd come to the bridge when called. Among the militiamen, Aiden noticed one who hadn't approached. He stood apart, tall, muscular, dark skin, short black hair, a scar across his left cheek, from his ear to his chin. A weapon. Not an axe, not a pitchfork, a real battle sword in a worn leather sheath. His stance, relaxed but composed, weight evenly distributed on both feet, arms at his sides, a professional, not a peasant. Aiden approached. He asked his name. The man replied, Ko Jian, a mercenary, from the eastern continent. He arrived in Westmark 3 months ago. No work, no money. Croft took her in exchange for help with training. Her voice was low and steady. Her accent was barely noticeable. Aiden asked why an unemployed mercenary was training peasants for free. Jian looked him in the eye, directly, without a bow, without deference. She replied that she didn't like cutting down the weak. A simple answer, an honest one. Aiden offered payment, a salary, a position, a title. Jian refused. She said she doesn't serve boys. She served one. He died. She doesn't want to anymore. Aiden nodded. He didn't press the issue. He asked only one thing. If she wouldn't serve, maybe she could at least help train people for the battle for Mirn. Then she'd be free. No obligations. Jian was silent for a moment. Then she nodded, briefly. A single movement of her head. The blue panel flickered faintly. Jian was added to the registry. Profession, warrior, mercenary. Loyalty, 15 out of 100. Nothing unlocked. 15 out of 100. Not much, but she's here. It's a start. The return trip took 4 hours. Dust swirled in the darkness. Stars shone overhead. The timer read 8 days and 11 hours. Aiden was counting. 22 guards in the capital. 113 militiamen in Croft. A total of 135 fighters. Of those, maybe 20 are trained. The rest are peasants with axes. Against 40,000. The math is monstrous. But he has something the 40,000 don't have. A narrow bridge. A brilliant engineer. Catapults that strike 3 times farther than standard ones. A spy network of 32 children. A general who has sworn allegiance. A captain of the guard who did not desert. And a merchant family that will supply weapons. 40,000 against 135. In an open field, that's certain death. On a bridge across a river, it's a challenge, a difficult one, but a mission nonetheless. He returned to the capital late at night. Sira was waiting for him at the palace gates. She stood there with a torch. Her face, as always, was stony, but she was waiting. This was new. She reported. While he was away, 12 more people had come to the palace. Former soldiers. They'd heard about the porridge and Hartvin's execution. They want to enlist in the guard. That makes 34 guards, plus 2 of Hartvin's former men. 36 and more. Hannah sent someone, a child of about 10 with a note. 2 carters at the south gate, whom Morvain had bribed, have been captured by Hannah's men and are being held in the tavern's basement. What should be done with them? And one more thing. A light is visible through the window of the former king's study. Someone is in there. Sira didn't go in. She was waiting for orders. Aiden nodded. Bring the carriers in for questioning in the morning. The light in the study. He'll go himself. He climbed the stairs, the hallway. The study door was ajar. Candlelight, shadows on the walls. He entered. A woman was sitting at his father's desk. 25 years old, blonde hair styled in an elaborate updo, a dark blue dress, slender arms, long fingers. Her face was beautiful and cold, like a porcelain mask. Lady Celeste Morvain, formerly the widow of Anselm III, formerly Aiden's stepmother, 4 years his senior, niece of the traitor Duke Morvain, forced into marriage with the old king as a spy for her family. Aiden's memories of her from his past life were almost non-existent. He had seen her at balls, beautiful, quiet, polite, unobtrusive, the perfect courtier, the perfect spy. Celeste looked up. She looked at Aiden, without a smile, without a mask. For the first time in his presence, her face was alive, tired, tense, alive. On the table in front of her lay a box, small, wooden, open. Inside was a stack of letters. She said she'd been waiting for him since last night, that time was running out, that Morvain knew about Hartvin's execution and was furious, that in 3 days he would be in the capital with a personal guard of 100 men under the pretext of the coronation, that in reality he was planning a coup. Aiden's arrest, declaring himself regent, opening the gates to Chiron. Aiden listened. His face was impassive. Inside, he was counting. 100 men in Morvain's personal guard, in 3 days, plus 40,000 in 8. Celeste slid the box toward him. Letters. Encrypted correspondence with the Republic of Ulven. She'd been keeping it up for a year, not on her uncle's orders, against her uncle. She hated Morvain more than anyone in the world. He'd used her, sold her like a piece of property, forced her to live with a drunken old man and put on a smile. She endured, she waited, and she wrote to Ulven. She gathered evidence. She built connections. She waited for the moment. The moment had come. Aiden took one letter. He unfolded it, a cipher. Numbers and letters that meant nothing without the key. Celeste handed him the key, a thin parchment with a substitution table. He decoded the first line, a message from the Ulven consul, confirming that the Republic was interested in Westmark's independence as a buffer between itself and Chiron. They're ready to negotiate. Terms are negotiable. This was more than just information about a conspiracy. It was a diplomatic channel, alive, working, created by a woman whom everyone had considered an empty porcelain doll. The blue panel flashed. Celeste Morvain added to the registry. Profession, diplomat, double agent. Loyalty, 65 out of 100. Hidden loyalty unlocked. Plus 1,800 crown points. 65, the highest starting score of all. She'd been on his side from the very beginning. She'd just been waiting to make sure he wasn't like his father. Aiden sat down across from her. They talked for 3 hours, by candlelight, quietly, like conspirators. Because that's exactly what they were. 2 conspirators against the whole world which wanted to destroy their small, broken kingdom. He told her the plan, the bridge, fortifications, Rotar, the militia, May and the money, Eden and the catapults, Hannah and intelligence. She listened, nodded, made suggestions, smart suggestions, precise ones. She knew the balance of power better than he did, knew which of the dukes were wavering, who had already betrayed them, who might still change their mind. They drew up a plan for Morvain. Don't kill him, not yet. A dead Morvain would become a martyr for the southern lords. A living, exposed Morvain would be a disgrace. They had to let him arrive, let him start the coup, and stop him in public. The first 3 days flew by like in Kandahar, quickly, tough, no room for error. Aiden slept 4 hours a day. The rest of the time he worked. Morning, palace rounds, porridge for the guards, Sira's report, numbers. 36 guards yesterday, 41 today. 5 new ones came from villages 5 miles from the capital. They heard about hot meals and the canceled tax. They brought their axes. Axes aren't swords, but an axe in trained hands is better than empty hands, Sira reported without emotion. A steady voice, clear numbers. She didn't smile. She didn't praise. She didn't criticize. She just did her job. Loyalty, 32 out of 100. Rising by 2 points a day, slowly, but rising. After the report, Aiden went to Eden's workshop, every day. The blueprints were turning into stone and wood. Eden had sent the first group of workers to the Mern Bridge, 40 people, carpenters and masons from the capital. They were paid 1 gold piece a day, 3 times the usual rate. But time was of the essence. The first wall rose on the western bank, 3 meters high, 1 meter thick. Stone bound with mortar mixed with ash, according to Eden's recipe. She explained that the ash made the mortar twice as hard as usual. In a week, the stone would set solid. Not even a battering ram could break through. Towers, 2 of them, on either side of the wall, square, 5 meters high. Platforms for archers at the top, arrow slits in the walls, staircases inside. Iden drew every detail, every stone, every step. The workers looked at the blueprints and shook their heads. No one had built anything like this in Westmark for the last 30 years. Aiden stood nearby and watched as the wall grew, stone by stone, row by row, slowly, but it was growing. Catapults, 2 of them, cross 3 design, double counterweight, extended lever, range of 1,000 paces. Eden assembled them in the workshop, all by herself, with 3 assistants, wood, ropes, metal fasteners from the blacksmith's forge. Every detail was fitted by hand. The first catapult was ready on the 4th day. Aiden came for the test. Eden loaded a stone the size of a human head. She pulled the lever. The stone flew off. Far, very far. It struck a hill on the far bank of the Mirna, 800 paces. Eden frowned. She said it wasn't enough. It needed calibration. It needed a different counterweight, 1,000 steps, at least. Aiden said that 800 was already 3 times farther than a standard catapult, and that she was a genius. Eden blushed. She turned away. She muttered something about calculations and the wind. Loyalty, 30 out of 100. It was growing more slowly than for the others. Eden didn't trust words. She trusted only work. Every correct order, every delivered material, every completed drawing added a point. During the day, Aiden worked with May. Cash flow, 4,000 gold pieces from the Yuns, 12,000 from Hartfin, total 16,000. Expenses, monthly pay for the guard and militia, 1,200. Construction of fortifications, 400. A month's provisions for 500 men, 600. Weapons, 200 sets of infantry equipment, 2,000. Catapults and siege equipment, 500. Horses, 400. Medicines and a physician for the infirmary, 200. Total, 5,300. Balance, 10,700. May calculated faster than he'd expected. Her quill flew across the pages of the thick book. She kept track of every gold coin, every silver coin, every copper coin. Daniel smiled to himself. 19 years old and managing the budget of an entire kingdom. In his past life, people like her were called child prodigies and sent to Wharton. Here, she was sent to balls. Between calculations, May would talk about trade routes, about grain prices in neighboring provinces, about which merchants were still around and under what terms they could. Her knowledge of the market was encyclopedic. She knew the name of every middleman within a 100-mile radius. She knew who owed whom, who was hiding income, who was smuggling goods through the southern pass. The information was worth its weight in gold. In the evenings, Aiden met with Hannah. The girl would come in through the window, always through the window. Doors were for normal people, and she didn't consider herself normal. She reported back. The spy network ran like clockwork. 32 children on the rooftops and in the basements of the capital saw everything. Merchant Laurent from East Street sent a raven to Chiron. The message was unknown, but the raven flew east. 2 new faces in the city. They arrived from the south, dressed like merchants, but their hands weren't those of traders, calloused, knife-wielding. Morvain's men, or perhaps Rothwell intelligence. Hannah couldn't say for sure, but she kept watch. Hannah's brother was on the mend. The court physician came every day. The medicine was working. The boy had started eating. Hannah didn't say thank you. She didn't know how. But every evening, her reports grew longer and more detailed. Loyalty, 30 out of 100. It was rising. Morvain arrived on the 3rd day, exactly as Celeste had warned. A column of 20 horsemen and 80 foot soldiers. The guard. Not ceremonial. Combat ready. chainmail, swords, shields bearing the Morvain coat of arms, a silver falcon on a black field. The Duke rode at the head of the column, tall, thin, graying temples, a nose like the beak of a bird of prey, eyes cold and calculating. He looked like a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, and he wanted Westmark. Morvain rode into the palace courtyard like a master. He dismounted. He looked at the guards at the gate, 4 of them, without chainmail, with spears more suited for propping up a fence. He smirked. He walked into the throne room. Aiden was waiting. He stood by the window with his back to the door, not on the throne, on purpose. The throne was empty. The crown lay on a cushion nearby. Morvain entered. He stopped. He surveyed the hall, an empty throne, his young nephew by the window, 4 guards along the walls, Celesta in the corner, quiet as a shadow. Morvain didn't know that 30 more guards stood beyond the walls of the throne room. He didn't know that Hannah was sitting on the roof with 2 boys, listening to every word through a ventilation shaft. He didn't know that May was standing behind the curtain with a scroll, taking notes. He didn't know that Sira was waiting behind the side door with her sword at the ready. Morvain began to speak. His voice was soft as silk. Condolences, grief, a loss for the entire kingdom. He had come to help, to support, with counsel and sword. The coronation must proceed with dignity, with the blessing of all the dukes. He was ready to shoulder the burden of regency until the young king came of age. Temporarily, of course. Aiden listened, silently. He counted Morvain's men, 100. His guards, 36 in the capital, plus 4 in the hall, 40. Minus. Morvain's men are professionals. Half of his guards are former peasants. They won't hold their ground in open combat. So there would be no open battle. Morvain finished his speech. He waited for a response. Aiden turned away from the window. He looked at his uncle. He thanked him for the visit, for his condolences, for the offer. He said he appreciated his family's concern and that he would like to discuss the details of the regency. Over dinner, tonight, in the Great Hall. Morvain was surprised. He'd expected an argument, resistance, a refusal. The boy agreed, too easily, suspiciously so. But turning down the invitation would have been even more suspicious. He nodded, accepted, left. His guard was stationed in the barracks of the East Wing, exactly where Aiden had ordered them to be stationed. Because the East Wing had only 1 entrance and 1 staircase. A bottleneck. 10 guards could trap 100 guardsmen inside if they knew when to close it off. Dinner began at 7 in the evening. The Great Hall, a long table, candles, wine, meat, bread. Barney had outdone himself. He'd created a feast out of nothing. Hartvin's former supplies had helped. Morvain sat to Aiden's right. His 2 captains were beside him. The rest of the guard was downstairs in the barracks, eating, drinking, relaxing, just as planned. The wine flowed freely for the guests. Aiden drank water. Morvain noticed. He raised an eyebrow. He asked if his nephew would like some wine. Aiden replied that he'd given it up. Morvain smiled, indulgent, the way one smiles at a child who promises never to eat sweets again. The conversation turned to politics. Morvain was testing the waters, carefully, with hints. Kat-Yaren is strong, Westmark is weak. We need allies. Perhaps a compromise is better than war. Perhaps a vassal oath to Kairen while retaining his title. Morvain is ready to act as a mediator. Aiden nodded. He listened. He agreed in words. Inside, he was counting down the minutes. He was waiting for the signal. The signal came at 9. Hannah. Through the ventilation shaft. 3 knocks on the pipe. The guards in the barracks were drunk. That's it. Barney's wine had been spiked. Not poison, a sleeping potion. Mild, harmless. But in an hour they'd be sleeping like the dead. Aiden stood up. Morvain looked at him questioningly. Aiden said he wanted to show his uncle something. He stepped out from behind the table. He walked over to the side door. He opened it. Standing behind the door was Sira, with a sword. Behind her were 10 guards, armed. Morvain turned pale. He jumped to his feet. His 2 captains reached for their swords. Sira stepped forward. One blow with the hilt to the first captain's face. He collapsed. The second froze. 10 spears were pointed at his chest. Morvain stood by the table, pale. His eyes darted about, searching for a way out. There was no way out. Aiden approached. He stood directly in front of him. He pulled letters from his belt, those very ones, from Celesta's box, decoded. Morvain's correspondence with Chiron, the secret oath to Emperor Valtor, the promise to open the gates, the plan for the regency, the names of the recruited dukes, the sums, the dates, everything. Morvain looked at the letters, then at Celesta, standing in the corner, calm, with a faint smile. He understood. His niece, his obedient, silent doll, whom he had sold to the old king. She had betrayed him. Aiden laid the letters out on the table. He spoke evenly and loudly. Duke Morvain is accused of treason, of secretly swearing allegiance to a foreign ruler, of conspiring to overthrow the rightful king of Westmark. The evidence is on the table. The witnesses are in the room. Morvain trembled. Then he pulled himself together. He straightened up. His cold eyes narrowed. He declared that the boy didn't understand who he was messing with, that the southern dukes would support him, that without the Morweens, Westmark was nothing, that Aiden would regret it. Aiden didn't reply. He nodded to his highness. The guards stepped forward. They bound Morwain. They bound the captains. They led them away. 20 minutes later, Aiden stood at the entrance to the east wing. Behind the door, 100 of Morvain's guards lay in a death-like sleep. 10 guards stood by the door, spears at the ready. When the guards awoke in the morning, they would find their weapons removed and the door blocked. They would be offered a choice: swear allegiance to the crown or leave unarmed, crossing the border of Westmark. Aiden expected that at least half would stay. Professional soldiers who have nothing to lose. 100 guardsmen don't choose who to fight for. They choose who pays them. And Aiden was now paying. Morvain sat in the palace basement, bound, under guard, alive. Aiden didn't kill him, not out of mercy, out of calculation. A dead Morvain is a martyr. A living, exposed Morvain is a disgrace to every southern lord who had dealings with him. The letters would be copied and sent to every castle in Westmark. Let every duke see how easily treason is exposed. Let each one consider whether it's worth the risk. Celeste stood nearby, silent. She stared at the closed cellar door. Her face was calm, but her hands were trembling. Quietly, barely noticeably. Years. For years she had waited for this moment. For years she had endured. For years she had played the role of an empty puppet. Now the puppet had broken the puppeteer. Aiden didn't say any pretty words to her. It wasn't the time. He simply nodded. She nodded back. That was enough. The blue panel glowed brightly. Plus 2,600 crown points. Morvain neutralized. Level 1 internal threat eliminated. Average loyalty in the capital, 31 out of 100. Average loyalty among the aristocracy, -5. As expected. The dukes are frightened. Frightened people aren't loyal. But frightened people don't attack either. That's enough for now. Rotar sent a messenger. The militia is growing. 183 men. 10 are arriving from the villages every day. Training is underway. Jian is putting them through their paces from dawn till dusk. Spear drill, a wall of shields, the basics. 10 days isn't enough to train a soldier, but it's enough to teach them to stand in formation without dropping their spears or running away. Jian knew her stuff. Jian's loyalty, 18 out of 100. It's rising by 1 point a day. She was watching Aiden, not openly, out of the corner of her eye, just as an old wolf watches the new leader of the pack, waiting for a mistake or confirmation. Aiden sent a note. The first wall is finished. The left tower is halfway done. Work has begun on the right tower. The catapult has been calibrated. 920 paces. Not 1,000, but close. The second catapult will be ready in 3 days. May sent a report. 200 sets of infantry gear delivered from the Yun's workshops. Spears, shields, leather armor. Not the best quality, but it's something. Aiden was sitting in his office. He was crunching the numbers. 213 combat-ready men, including the militia and the guard, minus the sick and infirm, plus possible defectors from Morvain's guard. Let's say 50. That comes to about 250, against 40,000. No, not against 40,000. Against those who can fit on the bridge at the same time. The bridge is 8 paces wide. In battle formation, that's 4 men across. The depth of the column on the bridge is 100 paces. That's 400 men at once. But the rear ranks can't fight. They're just standing there. In fact, a maximum of 200 men are in direct contact with the wall. 250 defenders behind the wall against 200 attackers on the bridge. Plus 2 catapults firing at the camp on the other side. Plus towers with archers. Plus a moat filled with water. It's not hopeless. It's difficult, but not hopeless. The problem lies elsewhere. Chiron won't keep storming the bridge forever. 3 legions mean 3 commanders, 3 different approaches. If the first one fails on the bridge, the second will try a crossing upstream or downstream. The Mirna is deep, but not bottomless. Pontoons could be set up. We could find a ford. We could go around it. Aiden looked at the map. The tactical overlay showed fog. Too much fog. He needed eyes on the other side. He called Hannah. She appeared at the window 5 minutes later. He asked if she could send people across the river to the other side to watch the Chiron columns and keep count. Report back. Hannah thought for a moment. Her kids. City kids, not forest kids. But she had a contact, a fisherman on Mirna. An old man named Graham. He ferries people across for silver. He knows every ford, every shoal, every current. If Aiden pays, Graham will ferry 2 people to the other side. Aiden agreed. 2 observers on the other side. That's a start. The blue panel flashed. The tactical overlay has been updated. The reconnaissance zone has been expanded 5 miles east of Mir. The fog is lifting. Slowly, but it's lifting. Night. The 6th day. The timer read 5 days and 9 hours. Aiden stood on the capital's wall and looked east. Somewhere out there, beyond the river, beyond the forests, beyond the hills, 3 legions were marching. 40,000 boots pounding the road. 40,000 swords in their sheaths. Supply trains, siege engines, cavalry. A war machine that had crushed a dozen countries in 20 years. And it was coming here, toward him. Toward 250 peasants with spears. Toward a single wall and 2 catapults. Toward a 22-year-old boy in whose body lived a 34-year-old officer from another world. He stood on the wall and watched. The wind ruffled his hair. It was cold. It was quiet. And for the first time in 6 days, Aiden allowed himself to think about fear. Not abstract fear, concrete fear. What if the wall doesn't hold? What if the catapults missed? What if the militia fled? What if he was wrong? What if 250 people died because some major from Baltimore decided he could play king? What if? He stood on the wall and thought about it for 3 minutes. Then he pushed the thought aside, like deleting an unnecessary file. In Kandahar, he'd thought the same thing before every operation. And every time, he'd done the same thing. He'd pushed the thought aside. He went to work. People depend on his mind, not his fear. He climbed down from the wall. He returned to the palace. Sira was waiting for him in the hallway. Her face was stony. But there was something in her eyes. She told him she'd read her father's diary. All of it. The coordinates were there, the location, the first king's arsenal. Her father had found it a year before his death. He hadn't had time to report it, or maybe he didn't want to. Reporting it to Anselm would have meant losing the arsenal to drunken hands. The arsenal. Aiden felt something click inside him. The blue panel flashed. Sira Voss. Loyalty. 50 out of 100. Threshold reached. The first king's arsenal. Location unlocked. The cellars of the palace's north tower. Level -3. Behind a false wall. Sira was looking at him, waiting. Aiden nodded. Let's go. They went down together, down the stairs, past the cellars, past the dungeon where the bound Morvain was snoring. Lower. Level 2. Level 3. Dampness. Darkness. The torches smoldered. Sira walked ahead. She found a wall. The third stone on the left. She pressed it. The mechanism creaked. The wall slid open. Behind it was a room. Large, dry. Metal glinted in the torchlight. Aiden entered. He stopped. Weapons. Racks along the walls. Swords, spears, shields, bows, quivers of arrows, chainmail, helmets. Not rusty, not old. Well-oiled, wrapped up, preserved. Someone had hidden this 400 years ago and made sure the metal wouldn't corrode. Aiden counted. 200 swords, 300 spears, 150 shields, 80 bows, 120 suits of chainmail, arrows. Continue about 4,000, bundles of 50, neatly arranged. The arrowheads gleam. 400 years in the dark, and not a single spot of rust. That was impossible. Ordinary steel would have rotted away in a decade. Aiden ran his finger along the sword's blade. Cold, sharp. A delicate engraving on the blade. A symbol he had seen before. A crown with 3 rays. The same symbol that had flashed on the blue panel when the system was activated. The first king's weapon. Not just hidden, preserved, as an artifact, for the moment when it would be needed, for him. The blue panel exploded with information. The first king's arsenal activated. Weapons of royal forging. 3 times stronger than standard. 20% lighter, requires no sharpening, 200 complete sets of armor, plus 6,000 crown points, unlocked. Second-tier infantry, heavy infantry, maximum strength of 200. Requirement: soldiers with loyalty of at least 40. Aiden stood among the weapons and felt the plan taking shape. 200 sets from May for the militia. 200 sets from the arsenal for the heavy infantry. If he could find 200 men with a loyalty of 40, if we can arm them in time, if Eden finishes the wall, if the catapults can reach 1,000 paces, if Rotar can train them in formation in time. So many ifs. But now, every if has an answer. Sira stood nearby. She looked at her father's weapons, the swords he'd found, and refused to hand over to the drunken king. Her eyes glistened, not from tears, but from something else. Pride. She turned to Aiden. She said quietly that her father believed a true king would one day come. Not a drunkard, not a coward, a true one. One who would be worthy of these weapons. Aiden replied that he didn't know if he was worthy, but he knew that 250 men upstairs were waiting for him to try. That was enough. Sira nodded. For the first time, her face wasn't stony. There was something alive in her expression. They went upstairs. Aiden gave the order. The weapons from the arsenal were to be moved to the armory, under guard, quietly, without fanfare. Tomorrow morning they would begin arming the heavy infantry. Rotar would conduct the selection. There was only one criterion: those who had stood in the ranks longer than the others and hadn't run away. The night was short. The timer read 5 days and 2 hours. The morning of the 7th day began with a messenger from Rotar. The militia had grown to 241. Jian was pleased with the training. The pike formation held firm. The basic shield wall worked. The men were fierce and ready. Aiden sent the messenger back with an order. Rotara is to advance toward the Mernsky Bridge, all 241 of them, plus 53 of Morvain's guards who swore allegiance to the crown this morning. That makes a total of 294 fighters, plus 41 guards in the capital. That makes a total of 335. Of these, 200 will receive weapons from the armory, heavy infantry. The rest are light infantry, spears, shields, leather armor. May reported that another 20 sets of light equipment are ready. Eden reported that the second tower is complete. The moat is filled with water. The second catapult has been assembled. Calibration tomorrow. Hannah reported that the Chiron advance has been spotted by observers on the opposite bank. 800 horsemen, light cavalry, reconnaissance. They'll be at the bridge in 2 days. The main forces in 4 days, ahead of schedule, a day early. The timer was off, or Chiron had sped things up. It doesn't matter. 4 days instead of 5. Aiden had recalculated. Everything had shifted. The wall is ready. The towers are ready. The moat is ready. The catapults are almost ready. We have weapons. The men are almost in position. 4 days. He rode out to the bridge alone, on dust. The lame horse carried him steadily and stubbornly, just as it had carried him all this time. Myrna came into view an hour later. Wide, gray, cold. A stone bridge, old. 12 arches, 120 paces long, 8 paces wide. On the western bank stood the Wall of Eden, 3 meters high, gray stone, mortar mixed with ash, 2 towers on either side, square, 5 meters. A catapult was already mounted on the left tower, the first one, calibrated. The lever jutted toward the sky like a fist. Aiden rode up to the wall. He dismounted. He ran his hand over the stone, smooth, cold, solid. Eden stood beside him, ink on her hands, dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept for 3 days. But the wall stood, and the towers stood, and the moat was full of water, and the catapult faced east. Aiden said 2 words. Great job. Eden nodded. She turned away, mumbled that the second catapult would be ready by noon tomorrow. Then she staggered. Aiden caught her by the shoulder. She flinched, pulled away, looked at him warily. Then she relaxed for a split second. She said she was just tired. Aiden nodded. He said she needed to eat and sleep for at least 4 hours. The tower could wait. Eden shook her head. It wouldn't wait. 4 days. She knew. Hani's children had told her. The vanguard in 2 days. The main force in 4. The second catapult had to be ready tomorrow. Aiden didn't argue. Instead, he found Barney. The old cook had arrived with the supply wagon. The first-level field kitchen was up and running. 2 cauldrons, 4 assistants, porridge, stew, bread, food for 300 people. Aiden asked Barney to take the food to Eden, hot, and tea, and make sure she ate it all before she went back to the catapult. Barney nodded. He left. Aiden climbed up to the left tower. He surveyed the position, the river below, the bridge right in front of him, the eastern bank 400 paces away, the road stretching into the distance, empty, for now. In 2 days, 800 horsemen would come along it. In 4 days, 40,000 infantrymen. He stood on the tower and saw the battlefield. Not a map, not a tactical overlay. The real battlefield. Stone beneath his feet, wind in his face, the smell of the river, the sound of water beneath the bridge. This was real, not a game, not a strategy on a screen. Real people would die here in 4 days. His men. Those whose names he knew. Those to whom he had promised porridge and pay. Those who had believed a drunken prince who had suddenly sobered up. 335 men. 335 names in the register. 335 families waiting for them at home. He stood on the tower for 10 minutes. Then he went down, to work. He spent the rest of the day on the bridge, setting up positions, counting steps, measuring firing angles. Rotar arrived in the evening with the militia. 241 men, dusty, tired, with spears on their shoulders, marching in formation. A crooked one, but a formation nonetheless. Jian walked beside them, silently, sword on her back, eyes like a hawk's. She saw the wall, the towers, the catapults. She stopped. She looked. Then she looked at Aiden, for the first time, with something other than indifference, with interest. Loyalty, 20 out of 100. It had risen by 2 points with a single glance at the fortifications. She valued competence. Aiden hadn't built the wall, but Aiden had found Eden, and Eden had built the wall. A chain of decisions, each one correct. Rotar surveyed the wall for a long time, in silence. He walked along the wall. He climbed the tower. He came down. He looked at the moat, at the bridge, at the catapult. Then he turned to Aiden. He said that if he'd seen this a week ago, he wouldn't have left the palace. Aiden replied that if Rotar hadn't left, he wouldn't have gathered the militia in Croft. So everything worked out. Rotar grunted. He almost smiled. Almost. The night before the vanguard's arrival, the camp behind the wall, 300 men, campfires, the smell of porridge, whispered conversations. Someone was sharpening a sword. Someone was mending a boot. Someone was praying. A typical night before a battle. Aiden didn't sleep. He walked around the camp. Every campfire, every group. He sat down. He asked their names. He asked where they were from. He asked if they had a family. He listened. Aldrich the blacksmith from the village of Marlow. A wife and 3 daughters. His eldest son left for foreign lands 2 years ago. Aldrich stayed. Because the smithy belonged to his grandfathers, you can't just walk away from it. Tom the hunter from the woods beyond Croft. Alone. His dog stayed at home. He's worried about the dog. Marcus, a former soldier from the capital. He served under Anselm. He left when they stopped paying him. He returned when he heard about Hartwin. Not for the pay, for the principle. A thief stole. The king punished him. That's how it should be. Dozens of stories. Dozens of names. Dozens of lives that intertwined in one place, by one bridge, before one battle. The registry was swelling. The blue panel flashed continuously. +2, +3, +5. Loyalty grew with every conversation, with every handshake, with every glance into the eyes. By midnight, the Army's average loyalty was 74 out of 100. The blue panel flashed gold. For the first time, gold instead of blue. Unlocked. Fighting spirit. Legendary. Bonus. The vanguard arrived at dawn on the 9th day. Not in 2 days as expected. In 1.5. Hannon, the lookout on the opposite bank, lit a signal fire at 3 in the morning. Aiden was awake. Standing on the left tower, he saw the fire on the hill across the river. 1 fire. A pause. 2 fires. A prearranged signal. The enemy is close. Sooner than they'd thought. He went down. He woke Rotar. The general was up in a second. He'd slept fully clothed in chainmail, with his hand on the hilt of his sword. An old soldier's habit. Aiden said 1 word. "They're coming." Rotar nodded. 10 minutes later, the camp was on the move. Quietly. No shouting. No panic. People woke up and grabbed their weapons. No porridge was being cooked. There wasn't time. Barney handed out cold flatbreads, 2 per person. Water from water bags. Quickly. Silently. Aiden stood by the wall and looked at the bridge. Gray stone in the pre-dawn twilight. The river roared below. Fog crept across the water. Through the fog, shadows moved on the opposite bank. Many shadows. Horsemen. Chiron's light cavalry. Reconnaissance. 800 men. They emerged from the fog like ghosts. First a dozen, then more, then 100. The horses snorted in the cold. The horsemen spread out along the bank. They stopped. They looked at the bridge, at the wall, at the towers, in silence. Aiden counted. 800, exactly as Hannah had reported. Light cavalry, leather armor, short bows, sabers, fast and agile, not meant for storming fortifications, meant for reconnaissance and flanking attacks. So there won't be an assault, for now. They'd come to look, to assess, to report. At the head of the column stood a rider on a black horse, a scarlet cloak, the colors of Chiron, a crested helmet, the commander. He looked at the wall of Iden for a long time, then at the towers, then at the catapult on the left tower. Aiden stood on the wall, full height, no helmet, no armor, just a plain shirt. The wind ruffled his hair. It was foolish from a tactical standpoint. An arrow wouldn't reach him at that distance, but why take the risk? Yet it was the right thing to do in terms of the message it sent. Here I am, standing on my wall, not hiding. The vanguard commander turned his horse around. He rode away. His men followed. 20 minutes later, the eastern bank was deserted. They were gone. They didn't attack. They didn't even try. They took a look and left. Roeder stood next to Aiden on the wall. He said that now Chiron knows about the fortifications. He knows about the catapults. He knows the bridge is defended. That's both good and bad. Good because a head-on assault has become more costly in their calculations. Bad because they'll start looking for a way around. Aiden nodded. He asked Rotar where else the army could cross besides the bridge. Rotar thought for a moment. There are 3 fords. The upper one is 20 miles to the north. The middle one is 15 miles away. The lower one is 10 miles to the south. All are shallow, knee-deep for an adult man, but narrow. 3 men across at most. And the bottom is muddy. Cavalry will get through. Infantry in full armor will get stuck. Aiden took out a map and spread it out on the wall's stone. 3 fords, 3 vulnerable points, 335 fighters. It's impossible to defend everything. He made his decision. The main force would hold the bridge. 250 men behind the wall. Heavy infantry armed with the First King's weapons. Rotar in command. 20 men at each ford. Light infantry. Do not defend. Delay them. If the Chiron forces try to cross at a ford, 20 men won't stop the column, but they can delay it for an hour. 2. That's enough time for Rotar to move the reserves into position. The remaining 25 men are the reserve in the camp behind the wall. Not enough. Critically insufficient. But there's no other option. Rotar listened. He was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. He said the plan was reasonable. Not perfect, but reasonable. Considering they had 300 against 40,000, any plan would be a miracle. Aiden smiled and replied that miracles don't happen. What happens is the right calculation in the right place. The rest of the day was spent preparing. People dug, hauled stones, reinforced the wall. 20 volunteers went to the fords with a supply of stakes and ropes. At each ford they set up a simple barrier. Sharp stakes were driven into the riverbed. Ropes stretched between the banks at a height of a horse's knee. It won't stop them. It'll slow them down. Every minute of delay meant more lives on the bridge. Eden was calibrating the second catapult. 960 paces, not 1,000. She was angry, quiet, silent, lips pressed together, hands stained with ink and machine oil. She recalculated the counterweight, adjusted the mounts, fired again. 900. Closer. One more time. 990. She looked at Aiden. He stood nearby, waiting silently. She said she'd get it down to 1,000 by morning. He nodded. He had no doubt. That evening, Hannah brought news. Chiron's main forces were 2 days' march away, not 4. The vanguard had sent a messenger, and the column had picked up speed. They knew about the fortifications and were hurrying before the defenders could reinforce their positions even further. 2 days. Aiden recalculated the timer in his head. The blue panel confirmed it. The deadline had been adjusted. 2 days and 6 hours. Faster than the original 11 days. Chiron isn't waiting. And one more thing. Hannah paused. She looked away. Then she said that one of her boys had intercepted a raven. From the capital. Not from Morvain. From someone else. An encrypted letter. She couldn't read it. She brought it over. Aiden took the letter. A cipher. Not the same one Celeste used. A different one. He sent a messenger to the capital to see Celeste. She decoded it in an hour and sent a reply. A letter from the Rothwell clan, addressed to Chiron General Drax. The contents. The Rothwells propose opening the southern pass for a flanking maneuver. In exchange, they demand ownership of the 3 southern provinces of Westmark as their property following annexation. Signed, Lord Ashton Rothwell, clan chief. Aiden read it, folded it, and put it away. The Rothwells. 3rd-tier enemy, not a priority for now. The southern pass is far away. A flanking maneuver through the pass would take at least a week. Right now, the bridge is the priority. But remember, the Rothwells are enemies. Fact noted. The night passed without sleep. Aiden patrolled the positions. He checked the wall. He counted the arrows. 80 bows, 4,000 arrows, 50 per archer. If every third arrow hits its target, that's 1,300 killed or wounded, a serious number. But 40,000 minus 1,300 is still 38,700. The math is still monstrous. He climbed up to the right tower. Jian was standing there, alone, looking east, her hands on the railing, her face calm. She didn't turn around when he approached. She said, 2 days. He replied, 2 days. She was silent for a moment. Then she asked if he'd ever seen 3 legions on the march. Aiden replied that he hadn't in this body. Jian turned. She looked at him, straight on, into his eyes. She said she had seen it, 20 years ago, in another country, on the other bank of another river. Another man stood on another wall, with the same hopeless arithmetic, with the same eyes. He, too, knew every soldier by name. Aiden froze. She knew. She didn't fully understand, but she sensed it. That other man 20 years ago, the third strategist, summoned by the artifact from beyond the world's borders. He asked how it ended. Jian answered. He won the battle. He built an army. He saved the country. And then he died. Not in battle. Not at the hands of the enemy. He simply didn't wake up one morning. His heart stopped. He was 36, healthy, strong, without a single ailment. The last day before the battle was the longest. Aiden got up before dawn. He walked around the wall, checked every stone, every joint, every fastening. The wall of Eden held firm, sturdy, smooth, 3 meters of gray stone. The towers gazed down at the bridge like 2 square fists. The catapults were loaded. Eden had managed to squeeze 1,000 steps out of the second machine after all. She hadn't slept all night. She calibrated it, adjusted the counterweight, fired stones into the darkness, counted the steps by the sound of the impact. 1,012. She stood by the catapult with dark circles under her eyes and a quiet smile. It was the first time she'd smiled. Loyalty, 36 out of 100. Aiden descended to the river. The bridge lay before him, 120 stone paces above the water. Tomorrow, people would cross that bridge to kill his men, and his men would have to kill in return. Many of his 335 had never killed before. Peasants, blacksmiths, hunters. They sharpened axes and wielded spears, but had never seen a spear pierce another man's belly. That was a problem. Rotar knew it. Jian knew it. Sira knew it. Professionals always know. The first battle breaks men. Not everyone gets back up after the first blow. Not everyone stays in formation after the first scream. Aiden gathered the commanders. Rotar, Sira, Jian, the fourth, Captain Aldrich. A former blacksmith from Marlow, the most respected among the militiamen. Aiden had appointed him yesterday. Aldrich wasn't a soldier, but people listened to him. And on the battlefield, it's more important that people listen than that the commander knows every technique. 5 men gathered around the map carved into the stone. Aiden Dan laid out the plan. First line, heavy infantry, 120 men, weapons of the first king, chainmail, shields, swords. They stand behind the wall. They block the passage through the gate. 4 men in a row, 10 rows deep, rotation every 20 minutes. Fresh troops move forward. Tired ones fall back. Rotar is in command. Second line, archers, 80 men, on the towers and along the wall. They shoot across the bridge. The target isn't the infantry on bridge. The target is the column on the other bank, those who haven't yet crossed the bridge. If we strike the rear of the column, the front ranks will be cut off from reinforcements. Sira is in command. Third line, catapults, 2 of them. They're striking the camp and supply trains on the other bank, not the bridge. We need the bridge intact. If we destroy the bridge, the enemy will build pontoon bridges and cross in 10 places at once. The bridge is a funnel. A funnel is an advantage. Commanded by Eden, reserve, 80 men, light infantry, positioned behind the second line. If the first line falters, they close the gap. If the enemy breaks through the gates, they engage them behind the wall. Commanded by Jian. Ford crossings. 3 detachments of 20 each, already in position. One objective, delay, not defeat, delay. If the enemy crosses at a ford, fall back to the bridge. Don't play the hero. Don't die. Aiden repeated this twice. Don't die. Each of them is worth more than any hour gained. Messengers between the fords and the bridge. 4 of them. The fastest of Hannah's men. Boys on horse. They don't fight. They run and report. Rotar nodded. Gian listened in silence. Sira took notes. Aldrich twirled the helmet in his hands and frowned. Then he asked what to do if the wall fell. Aiden replied, "The wall won't fall. Mortar mixed with ash. A 3-meter stone. Chiron has no siege weapons in the vanguard. The battering rams are coming with the main column. If the vanguard reaches the walls before the main forces, they won't have the tools to breach it. If the main forces arrive with battering rams, there will be a different plan. But today, the wall will hold." Aldrich nodded, not entirely convinced, but he nodded. After the meeting, Aiden made his rounds through the camp. One last round. 335 faces, some pale, some focused, some were frightened. One guy, about 18, was sitting by the fire, sharpening an axe with such fury that he was striking sparks from the stone. His hands were shaking. Aiden sat down next to him. He asked his name. The guy answered, "Derek, from the village of Haven, a baker. He'd arrived 4 days ago. He'd never been in a fight, not even in a bar. It was his father's axe, for chopping wood, not for people." Aiden didn't say everything would be all right. It wouldn't be. Tomorrow, people would die. Maybe Derek. Maybe someone next to him. Instead, he asked who Derek had at home. His mother. His younger sister. His father died a year ago. He's the only man. If he dies, his mother and sister will be left alone. Aiden nodded. He said Derek would stand in the 3rd line, behind the wall, behind 2 rows of heavy infantry. The enemy won't reach him if the plan works. But even if they do, Derek won't be alone. There will be people nearby with swords who know how to use them. His job is to hold the axe and not run, nothing more. Derek nodded. His hands stopped shaking. Not out of bravery, out of the simplicity of the task. Hold the axe, don't run. That he could do. Aiden stood up. He walked on. At every campfire, it was the same thing. A name, a question, an answer, a brief conversation. Not a commander's speech, not grand rhetoric, just a man asking another man his name and who was waiting for him at home. It worked. Loyalty grew, not from words, from attention. Throughout his entire career in the army, Daniel had seen hundreds of officers. The best of them weren't the ones who spoke eloquently. The best were the ones who remembered names. Dawn on the 10th day was gray. Fog crept along the river. The air smelled of dampness and iron. Aiden stood on the wall between the towers and watched as people emerged from the fog on the opposite bank. Many people. First, the cavalry. 100, 200, 500. Heavy cavalry, not a light vanguard. Chainmail, helmets, long spears, scarlet banners with a golden eagle, the colors of Chiron. Behind the cavalry came the infantry, a column, wide, deep, step to step, in unison, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. They emerged from the fog like a stream of lava from a volcano, slowly, unstoppable, rank after rank, spears like a forest, shields like a wall. Aiden was counting, 10,000, 20, 30. The column seemed endless. Its tail disappeared behind the hill. Rotar stood nearby. He was counting too. His face was stony. His hands were calm. But the muscles on his cheekbones were twitching. He said that this wasn't 3 legions. It was 4. Valtor had sent reinforcements. 50,000 at least. Aiden said nothing. 50,000 instead of 40. There is a difference. But on a bridge 8 paces wide, the difference between 40 and 50,000 is theoretical. The bridge can hold the same number either way. The problem lies elsewhere. The 4th Legion consists of additional engineers, pontoons, siege engines, battering rams, possibly even riverboats. They can cross the Mirna not only via the bridge. Rotar understood this as well. A separate detachment emerged from the fog on the eastern bank. 20 horsemen. In the center, a tent on wheels, scarlet with gold fringe. A general's tent. The tent came to a stop on a hill across the river. A flag on a pole, a golden eagle on a scarlet field, and beneath it a second flag, a personal standard, a silver dragon. General Drax, commander of the Chiron Expeditionary Forces. Rotar spoke the name. His voice was hoarse. Drax, the butcher of the Red Fields. The one who slaughtered 12,000 Westmark soldiers 18 years ago. The one who hung prisoners from the trees along the road like garlands. Rotar paused. He added that Drax was clever. Cruel, but clever. He won't charge head-on. He'll apply pressure, methodically. Aiden nodded. Apply pressure methodically. That was exactly what he'd been waiting for. A methodical enemy is predictable. A predictable enemy can be outmaneuvered. An hour later, a lone horseman broke away from the Chiron positions. A white flag. A negotiator. He rode up to the bridge, stopped in the middle, waited. Aiden climbed down from the wall, walked out through the gate, crossed the bridge, stopped 10 paces from the envoy. A young officer, a spotless uniform, a haughty face. He looked at Aiden, at the plain shirt, at the absence of a crown, at the absence of an entourage. Contempt flashed in his eyes. He spoke formally. General Drax of Chiron offers King Aiden Westmark terms. Voluntary surrender, preservation of life, exile to Chiron, the title of Count, a small estate, an oath of vassalage to Emperor Valtor. Westmark becomes a province of Chiron. The population will not suffer. The garrison may return to their homes. Time to consider. 2 hours. Aiden listened, silently, his face impassive. Then he asked one thing. What would happen if he refused? The negotiator smiled, subtly, coldly. He stated that General Drax had an additional message. Drunken pup, where's your bottle? An insult, public, deliberate, in full view of both armies. 300 men behind the wall heard it. 50,000 on the other side of the river waited for a reaction. Aiden was silent for 3 seconds. Then he turned toward the wall. He raised his hand. A single gesture. Aiden, in the left tower, saw it. She pulled the lever. The Cross-3 catapult fired. A stone the size of a barrel soared into the gray sky. It flew over the river. It flew over the Chiron positions, and struck General Drax's tent precisely, on the hill across the river, 1,000 paces away. The tent into shreds of fabric and wood. Scarlet silk soared into the air like a cloud of blood, a pillar of dust. Screams, panic. Drax wasn't in the tent. He was standing 20 paces to the right, looking through a spyglass. But the tent, his personal tent, with his standard, blown to pieces by a single blow. From a distance of 1,000 paces. No catapult in the world could do that. The envoy turned pale. The horse reared up. Aiden spoke calmly. Tell General Drax. The next stone was aimed even more precisely. He turned around. He walked back toward the wall, without looking back. Silence beyond the wall. Then a roar. 300 voices at once. A cry born not of a command but of shock. Their small, strange, sober king had just destroyed General Chiron's tent with a single blow, in full view of everyone. The blue panel exploded, plus 18,000 crown points. The King by the Bridge legend has been activated. Bonus! All units under Aiden's command receive a plus 15% boost to combat stats within a 10-mile radius of the Mernsky Bridge. Unlocked. Level 2 Artillery. Ability to upgrade catapults to Siege class. Requirements. An engineer with a loyalty of 50 or higher. Resources. Time. Aiden climbed onto the wall. He looked at the Chiron positions. Chaos. The cavalry was regrouping. The infantry had come to a standstill. Officers were shouting. Drax stood on the hill amid the wreckage of his tent, staring at the bridge. At Aiden, 1,000 paces away. Aiden couldn't see his face, but he knew what was on it. Rage. Drax wasn't used to humiliation. The butcher of the red fields was accustomed to submission and fear, not to a stone in his own tent. And that rage meant one thing. He would attack. Quickly, viciously, without methodical pressure. Rage overrides calculation. That was exactly what Aiden had counted on. The assault began 3 hours later, without warning, without a signal. The Chiron infantry moved toward the bridge. The first column, 1,000 men, marching in formation, shields raised, spears forward, heavy footsteps on the stone of the bridge, a hollow rhythm, 1,000 boots at once. The ground trembled, the wall trembled, the people behind the wall trembled. Aiden stood on the wall, not behind it, on it, visible, exposed. It was tactically wrong and strategically necessary. His men had to see that he was there, that he wasn't hiding, that if they died, he would die first. The catapults fired, both at the same time. 2 stones flew over the bridge and slammed into the column on the other side, where the next 1,000 were waiting for their turn to cross the bridge. The stones struck the tight formation. It wasn't empty ground. It was people. Screams. Panic. The formation broke. The rear ranks mingled with the front. A traffic jam. On the bridge, the first 1,000 continued to advance, but the reinforcements were stuck. Archers in the towers opened fire. 80 bows. Arrows flew in a curtain across the wall. They fell onto the bridge, onto the column. Shields didn't save everyone. Arrows found gaps, arms, legs, necks. People were falling. Others stepped over the bodies. The column was squeezing together, pushing forward. They reached the wall. The gates were closed. The wall was 3 meters high. Impossible to climb without ladders. There were no ladders. The vanguard hadn't brought any. The main force had been in such a hurry they'd forgotten to bring them. Drax's fury had cost him the ladders. The Chirons were crowding against the wall, shields held overhead. Arrows rained down on wood and metal. Someone tried to help a comrade up. One managed to climb up. Sira met him with her sword. He fell back down. A second. A third. Not a single one stayed on the wall for more than 2 seconds. The heavy infantry stood behind the wall and waited. They hadn't had to fight yet. The wall was holding. The towers were holding. The catapults were holding. The Chironites were dying at the wall, unable to breach it. An hour later, the column retreated, leaving behind about 200 bodies on the bridge and at the wall. 200 killed and wounded in an hour. Not a single casualty on the Westmark side. Aiden wasn't pleased. 200 out of 50,000. 0.5%. They'll be back. With ladders, with a battering ram, with pontoon bridges. This was the first round, a test. Drax looked at the wall and now knows what's needed. But the first round has been won, and the 335 men behind the wall know it. Their hands didn't tremble. Their eyes blazed. They stood their ground. The wall stood firm. The catapults fired, and the enemy retreated. For the first time in 20 years, the Chiron army retreated from Westmark. The roar beyond the wall was louder than the mornings. Drax was a quick learner. On the second day of fighting, he didn't climb onto the bridge. Aiden stood on the tower and watched as Chiron engineers assembled the pontoons on the eastern bank. 3 flat-bottomed barges, wide, sturdy, capable of carrying 50 men each, upstream, 1.5 miles from the bridge, where the river is wider but shallower. At the same time, a second column advanced toward the bridge, carrying ladders, 6 of them, long, heavy. Each carried 8 men. Behind the column, a battering ram, a log 10 fists in circumference, bound in iron, on wheels, under a canopy of wet hides to prevent the arrows from setting it ablaze. A 2-pronged attack, the bridge and the pontoons simultaneously. Drax was pressing on 2 fronts to divide the defenders' forces. Aiden counted them. 335 fighters, minus 60 at the fords, 275. If he sent men to the pontoons, there would be even fewer on the wall. If he didn't send them, the Chiron would cross and strike from the rear. He chose the third option: catapults. Eden was standing nearby. He pointed at the pontoons. He asked if she could hit them. 1.5 miles. Out of range. Eden shook her head. 1,012 paces at most. The pontoons were 2,000 paces away. Impossible. A pause. She looked at the river, at the current, at the bank. Then she said that if they dragged one catapult to the northern ledge of the wall and fired not a stone but a barrel of burning resin, the range would be shorter. But the pontoons were made of wood. One burning barrel on the bank next to them, and the smoke would do half the work. Aiden looked at the northern ledge, 400 paces closer to the pontoons. If they moved the catapult there, the distance would shrink to 1,600. Still far. But burning pitch doesn't require precision. It's enough to hit nearby. He nodded. 20 men, 2 hours. They dismantled the catapult, hauled it over, and reassembled it at the new position. Eden was in command. Her hands were covered in oil. Her voice was hoarse. She hadn't eaten since last night. Aiden had sent Barney out for porridge. Barney returned with an empty pot. Eden ate it all without taking her eyes off her work. Meanwhile, Drax began the assault on the bridge. The column with the ladders moved forward. 1,000 men, 3 times heavier than yesterday's. Chainmail, full-face helmets, large shields, ladders overhead, a battering ram at the rear. Archers on the towers opened fire. Arrows pelted the shields. Chainmail and helmets deflected the blows. Casualties were fewer than yesterday. The Chiron had learned their lesson. They reached the wall. The ladders were set up, 6 at once. They began scaling the wall. Rotar's heavy infantry met them. The first king's sword sliced through Chiron steel like butter. Light, sharp. They never dull. The first Chiron soldier climbed over the wall and was struck in the chest. His chainmail offered no protection. The blades sliced through the links as if they were cloth. The second, the third, the 10th. The wall in front of the gate became slippery with blood. Rotar stood in the front row, gray-haired, in blood-soaked chainmail, a sword in his right hand, a shield in his left. He struck with precision, methodically, like a blacksmith striking an anvil, without rage, without fear, just work. Next to him was Aldrich, a former blacksmith, an axe, not a sword. The axe he'd used to chop wood for 20 years. Only now he wasn't chopping wood. And the axe did its job. A heavy blow from top to bottom. The Chiron shield split in two. The man behind the shield fell. Aldrich raised the axe and struck again. The rhythm of the forge carried over to the battlefield. The battering ram reached the gate. A blow. The gate shook. A second blow. A third. The gate creaked. Oak. Thick. But it creaked beneath the iron-shod log. Aiden ordered Sire. The archers were to shift their fire from the bridge to the battering ram. Concentrated fire. 80 bows aimed at a single target. Arrows flew down in a shower, raining down on the battering ram crew. Wet hides protected them from the fire, but not from the arrows. The men under the canopy fell one after another. The battering ram came to a standstill. New men rushed out of the column, took over, and struck again. The gate cracked. Aiden looked at the gate. 3 more blows and they'll break through. He climbed down from the wall, stood behind the gate, drew his sword. One of the first king's swords. The first time he'd held it. Light, cold, unfamiliar. Aiden's body remembered how to hold a sword. Poorly, but it remembered. Daniel's memory added something else. Calm, calculation, feet wider apart, center of gravity lower. Not fencing, just stand and strike whatever's in front of you. Like in hand-to-hand combat training, only with a sword. Jian stood beside him, silently, her sword in her hand. 80 reserve fighters behind them. The battering ram struck. The gate split open. Splinters flew inside. The Chiron poured through the breach. The first 3 5, 10. Jian stepped forward. One strike. The first Chiron collapsed. Second strike. The second. She moved like water, fluidly, effortlessly, every movement precise and economical. Not a single unnecessary swing, not a single wasted step. 20 years of combat experience in every strike. The reserves charged into the breach, 80 men, against those who had broken through. A narrow passage, 4 men in a row. The Chiron forces couldn't capitalize on their numerical advantage. They pressed forward with sheer numbers, but in such a confined space, their sheer mass worked against them. Those in the rear pushed those in front onto the defenders' swords. Aiden stood in the second line, behind Jian, behind the front-line fighters. A wounded man was dragged past him, the first casualty, Aldrich. His arm, a deep cut. The blacksmith clutched the wound with his good hand and cursed. The axe was covered in blood, not his own. Aiden looked toward the gate. The tide of attackers showed no sign of letting up. The Chironites were pouring through the breach. The reserves were holding, but for how long? He looked up at the wall. Rotar was fighting up there. The ladders, more and more of them. The wall was under attack at the same time as the gate. Double pressure. The men couldn't keep up. Sira was dashing from ladder to ladder. An arrow struck her in the shoulder, her left one. She pulled it out. She kept fighting. Blood on her chainmail. At that moment, a crash rang out from the north. Aiden. The catapult on the northern ledge fired. A burning barrel flew across the river. It missed the pontoons. It fell onto the bank 30 paces away. The pitch splattered. The grass caught fire. Smoke crept toward the pontoons. Aiden reloaded. A second shot. Closer. 22, 30 paces. Third. 10. Fourth. Hit. The barrel slammed into the outermost pontoon. The resin spread across the wood. The fire flared up instantly. The dry wood, soaked in resin, caught fire like a torch. The flames spread to the second pontoon, then to the third. Within 5 minutes, all 3 barges were ablaze. A column of black smoke rose into the gray sky. On the eastern bank there were screams, panic. People fled from the fire. Horses reared up. The flanking attack across the pontoons had failed. The bridge remained the only crossing, and the bridge still stood. The assault continued until noon. 4 hours of non-stop fighting. The Chiron forces attacked in waves. The first 1,000 retreated. The second took their place. The third. Fresh troops against those who had been fighting for 4 hours. Rotation. Simple and brutal. Wear down the defenders with fresh columns. Aiden rotated his men. 20 minutes on the line, 20 minutes rest. Porridge, water, bandaging, back to the front. Barney worked like a machine. The cauldrons never cooled down. Porridge flowed non-stop. Soldiers ate standing behind the wall, swords in hand. They swallowed without chewing. Washed it down with water. Returned to the front lines. First-rate field kitchen. 11th day. Deadline. The system showed 0 days, 0 hours. The timer reset to 0 and disappeared. A new line appeared in its place. The state's survival deadline had expired. The state had survived. The primary objective had been achieved. No new deadline had been set. Free control mode was activated. Aiden stood on the tower and looked at the Chiron camp. It was quiet. No columns. No battering rams. No pontoons. The Dracs were regrouping. After yesterday's losses, the assault had lost its purpose. 600 killed in a single day. To no avail. The wall stands. The towers stand. The catapults are firing. The bridge is impassable. Drax was smart. A smart general doesn't throw men against a wall he can't breach. A smart general changes strategy. Rotar stood nearby. He looked at the camp. He said that Drax was looking for a way around. New pontoon bridges. South or north? Further away from the catapults. Maybe even further upstream where the river is narrower and shallower. It's a matter of 2 or 3 days. Aiden nodded. He knew. He was thinking the same thing. The bridge was held. But the bridge wasn't the whole river. 50,000 men would find a way to cross if given time. He needed something more, something that would force Drax to retreat, not from the wall, but from Westmark. He climbed down from the tower. He found May. She was taking inventory in the camp tent, a quill tucked behind her ear, a book on her lap. He asked how much provisions the Chiron army had. May looked at him. She replied that 50,000 men eat about 100 metric tons of grain a day, plus meat, plus fodder for the horses. Chiron's supply trains stretch 80 miles from the border. Long, slow, guarded, but not indefinitely. Every day of delay at the bridge means 100 metric tons of grain wasted. In a week, shortages will begin. In 2 weeks, famine. Aiden asked if the process could be sped up. May smiled, that businesslike, steely smile that made her dangerous, and said that the Yoon family had contacts among the merchants on the Chiron side of the border, people who sell grain to the Chiron army. If these people were to suddenly delay shipments or reroute the convoys along the wrong route, accidentally, of course, purely commercial difficulties. Aiden looked at her. 19 years old, and she was proposing economic sabotage against the Imperial Army. He nodded. Go ahead. May stood up. She left. An hour later, a messenger rode off to the capital with a sealed letter for the Yoon household. Step 2. Intelligence. Aiden summoned Hannah. The girl appeared from somewhere above. Her habit of climbing roofs and towers hadn't left her, even in the military camp. Aiden gave her an assignment. Her people are on the other side of the river, observers. Don't just let them watch. Have them talk. To the Chiron soldiers, to the supply trains, to the camp servants. Rumors, simple rumors, that the wall is enchanted, that the catapults have a range of 3,000 paces, that King Westmark has 10,000 soldiers across the river, that Drax is leading the army into a trap. Lies, pure lies, but lies that take root in fear. After 600 killed in a single day, the Chiron soldiers are already afraid. They just need an excuse to fear even more. Hannah nodded. She left. She vanished like a shadow. Step 3. Diplomatic. Celesta. Aiden sent a messenger to the capital. A letter for the Olvan consul via the Celesta channel. Content. Westmark has held the Mirren Bridge. The Chiron army has been halted. Enemy losses are significant. Westmark is offering the Republic of Olvan diplomatic support, an open declaration that it does not recognize the Chiron annexation. Not military aid, not an alliance, just a declaration. A single public statement from Olvan declaring the annexation illegal. That is enough to turn a local conflict into an international incident. Chiron does not want war with Olvan. If Olvan sides with Westmark, even verbally, Valtor will recalculate the cost of this war. 3 steps: economic, informational, and diplomatic. None of them required the sword. All required time. The wall bought time. Every day that Drax stood before the bridge to no avail worked in Aiden's favor. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Hannah's intelligence reported, Chiron engineers are building new pontoons, further north, 5 miles from the bridge, larger than the previous ones. 6 barges, each carrying 100 men, the crossing in 2 days. Meanwhile, attacks on the bridge will continue, Aiden thought. 5 miles, beyond the range of any catapult. It's impossible to move them, so we need something else. He found Jian. The mercenary was sharpening her sword by the fire, silently, as always. He sat down beside her. He asked if she knew what a raid was. Jian looked at him. It was a strange question. Of course she knew. A raid, a swift strike, a hit and run. Aiden nodded. 20 men, at night, cross at the upper ford, 5 miles along the enemy's shore, reach the pontoons, set them on fire, return. Jian was silent for 10 seconds. Then she asked who would lead. Aiden replied that she would, if she agreed. Jian laid her sword on her lap. She looked at him. For a long time. She said it was suicide. 20 men behind enemy lines. If they're discovered, no one will make it out. Aiden nodded. He knows. That's why he needs her. The best warrior he's ever seen. If anyone can lead 20 people past 50,000 and back, it's her. Jian smirked, for the first time in his presence. A short, hard smirk that didn't reach her eyes. She said she didn't need flattery, but the raid was a good plan. Stupid, but a good one. She doesn't need 20, 12. The best. The ones who know how to move silently. Hunters, not soldiers. Soldiers make noise. Hunters don't. Aiden agreed. He called Rotor. They selected 12. Hunters from the Croft militia. Forest folk. Who knew every trail, every bush, every rustle. Jian surveyed them, silently. She nodded. They'll do. They'd set out at night. Across the upper ford. Along the riverbank. To the pontoons. Pots of resin. A flint. Quietly and quickly. Night. The camp slept a restless sleep. Sentries on the wall watched the east. Chiron's bonfires burned like an orange sea from horizon to horizon. There, out there in the darkness, 12 hunters and 1 mercenary were moving along the river. No torches, no sound. Shadows among shadows. Aiden stood on the tower and waited. An hour, 2, 3. Nothing. Silence. Then a fire flared on the northern horizon. Bright, orange. Then a second. A third. 6. 6 pillars of flame at once. The pontoons. All 6. Burning. Shouts from the other side of the river. Distant. Faint. Horns. An alarm signal. The Chiron camp stirred. Torches rushed north. The cavalry advanced. Aiden counted the minutes. 12 hunters in Jian. The way back. 5 miles in the dark. Along the enemy's shore. Past the awakened camp. Across the ford. An hour. The longest hour of his life. Longer than any hour in Kandahar. Because there, he lost subordinates. Here, he lost people he had sent himself, personally, knowing they might not return. At dawn, shadows appeared at the ford. 13. He counted 3 times. 13. Everyone had returned. Jian led the way, a sword on her back, soot on her face, her eyes calm. Behind her, 12 hunters, dirty, wet. 1 was limping. 1 was holding his arm. The rest were unharmed. Aiden met them on the bank. Jian approached. She stopped. She reported that 6 pontoons had been burned, 2 Chiron sentries killed, 1 security patrol bypassed. Casualties, 0. The limping man had stepped on a snag in the dark. His arm was dislocated, not broken. Aiden nodded. Then he did something he hadn't planned. He held out his hand, not like a king to a subject, like an officer to an officer. Jian looked at his hand, then at him. Then she shook it, firmly, briefly. The blue panel flashed. Ko Jian, loyalty, 45 out of 100, a 10-point jump. She didn't smile, but something had changed in her eyes, something new. Not trust, not yet. Recognition. He had sent men to their deaths, and they had returned, all of them. That meant something. Morning of the 11th day. The Chiron camp had not attacked. Drax stood on the hill and looked at the bridge through his spyglass. His tent was gone. Burned 2 days ago. His pontoon boats had been burned that night. His casualties were nearing 1,000 in 3 days. The bridge still stood. The wall still stood. The catapults were firing. And that boy on the wall didn't even look tired. By noon, a lone horseman rode out from the Chiron positions. A white flag. The second envoy in 3 days. A different one. Older. Without arrogance. A serious face. He rode out onto the bridge. He stopped. Aiden went out to meet him. The envoy spoke. General Drax proposes a 3-day truce to bury the dead. Aiden agreed. A 3-day truce to bury the dead. This isn't a victory. It's a pause. But a pause that Aiden can use, and Drax cannot. 3 days without fighting. 3 days to reinforce the wall, to repair the gates, to restock the arrows, to await the arrival of reinforcements from the capital, to await a reply from Olvin, to let May work with the supply wagons. Drax thinks he's taking this pause for himself. Drax is wrong. Aiden returned behind the wall. The 323 remaining fighters stood and watched him. Dirty, tired, wounded, alive. He stopped, looked at them, spoke softly, but his voice echoed through the silence. He is not a king. He is the one who stands between them and what lies beyond the river. That is enough. Silence. Then Rotar dropped to one knee. Behind him, Sira. Behind her, Aldrich. Behind him, everyone else. 323 people on their knees. Not in worship, in gratitude, for being alive. The blue panel glowed gold. Aiden stood on the bridge and looked at them. Then he turned toward the supply train. He found a bottle. An old habit of the body. Wine. Brought with the supplies from the capital. He took it, looked at it, turned to the first soldier in line, a young man, his head bandaged, tired eyes. Aiden held out the bottle. "Drink. You've earned more than I have." The soldier took the bottle. His hand was shaking. May was counting the spoils of war. Chiron weapons left on the bridge and by the wall. 200 swords, 150 shields. The truce lasted 3 days. Aiden didn't waste a single hour. The gates were repaired. Aiden reinforced them with iron strips from the captured Chiron weapons. 100 swords were reforged into fasteners and hinges. The gates became twice as strong. The arrow supply was replenished. Blacksmiths in the capital worked around the clock. Arrowheads, shafts, feathers. May organized the supply. 200 arrows a day. By the end of the truce, the stockpile had grown to 4,200. People were arriving. 60 more volunteers came from the capital, 30 from the surrounding villages. Word of the battle at the bridge spread through Westmark like wildfire. The drunken prince hadn't fled. The drunken prince was standing on the bridge. The drunken prince had repelled the Chiron assault and burned General Drax's tent. People weren't coming out of loyalty. They were coming out of hope. A small, fragile hope that perhaps this boy really wasn't like his father after all. A total of 423 fighters. Of these, 200 were in the heavy infantry, armed with the weapons of the first king. 120 light infantry, 80 archers, 23 in reserves and reconnaissance. Against 50,000, it's still laughable. But 3 days ago, there were 335. A 25% increase in 3 days. If we hold the bridge for another week, more will come. People flock to the victor. That's the law. On the 3rd day of the truce, Jian came to him at night. Not through the window like Hannah, through the door, like a grown-up. She sat down by the fire across from Aiden and began to speak. 20 years ago, the eastern continent, the kingdom of Shanlin, small, sandwiched between empires, dying. A familiar story. A strategist appeared out of nowhere, a young man in the body of a local prince, an alien mind, foreign knowledge, a blue panel before his eyes. The crown system, exactly the same. The registry, points, the tree of reforms. His name was Ken. In his past life, he was a military engineer, from a world where machines fly through the sky and people communicate through small glowing plates. Jian was young back then, 8 years old, the general's daughter. She saw how Ken transformed Shanlin from ruins into a fortress, how he built the walls, how he created an army, how he defeated enemies one after another. In 3 years, he achieved the impossible. Shanlin became the most powerful state on the eastern continent. And then Ken died. One morning, for no reason. His heart stopped. A healthy 36-year-old man. The doctors found nothing. No illness, no poison, no wounds. It just stopped, like a clock whose spring had run out. Jian paused. Then she continued. After Ken's death, she found his notes. Secret ones, hidden ones. He knew he was going to die. The system had warned him a year before his death. The price of the artifact. Every use of the system takes time. Not years, not months. Minutes. Every node unlocked in the tree of reforms. Every crown point earned. Every entry in the registry, every unlock, a tiny piece of life, imperceptible, like a drop from a bucket, but the drops add up. Over 3 years, Ken had used the system thousands of times, thousands of drops. The bucket was empty. Aiden listened. His face was impassive. Inside, he felt cold. He counted them all. From the very first day, every increase in crown points, every unlock, every flash of the blue panel. The truce ended at dawn on the 4th day. Drax did not resume the assault. Instead, he withdrew his army. Aiden stood on the tower and watched as 50,000 men broke camp. Tents were being folded up. The supply trains formed a column. The cavalry left first. The infantry followed, slowly, in an orderly fashion. Not a rout, a retreat. Rotar stood nearby. He was silent. Then he said he couldn't believe his eyes. Aiden didn't believe it either, but he understood. May. Her supply train diversion had worked. Merchants on the Chiron side had held up the grain shipments. The supply trains had taken the wrong routes. The Chiron army had been on reduced rations for 3 days. 50,000 starving people facing a wall they couldn't breach, plus Olvin's statement, plus the rumors spread by Hannah's children, plus the burned-out pontoons, plus 1,000 killed in 4 days of fighting. Drax did the math, and he didn't like the result. The cost of the annexation in Westmark had exceeded its value. For now. That's an important word. For now. They'll be back. Valtor isn't the type to retreat forever. But today they're leaving. The column stretched for miles. Dust rose in a cloud. The sun shone through the dust, golden and hazy. By noon, the eastern bank was deserted, only trampled earth, fire pits, rubble, traces of thousands of feet, and silence. A silence that rang out after 4 days of battle, just as ringing echoes in one's ears after an explosion. Aiden climbed down from the tower. He walked through the gate. He stepped out onto the bridge. For the first time in 11 days, he crossed it all the way, to the eastern bank. He stood on the bank where the Chironites had been. He looked at the wall of Eden from their side. Gray stone, towers, catapults. The Westmark banner on the left tower, blue with a silver stag. Sira had hung it that morning, on the first day of the fighting. He hadn't ordered it. She'd hung it herself. From this side, the wall looked impregnable. 3 meters of stone, smooth walls without any protrusions. The towers loomed over the bridge, arrow slits, a moat filled with water, a fortress in the middle of the river. Small, but a fortress nonetheless. Eden built it in 7 days, out of stone and mortar mixed with ash. The girl who used to draw in a run-down workshop because no one was placing orders. He turned around and walked back. They were waiting for him on the West Bank. Everyone. 423 people, standing along the wall, on the towers, staring at him, silently. He walked through the gate, stopped, looked at Rotor. The general stood upright, gray-haired, in dirty chainmail, a face that had finally remembered how to smile. Not broadly, just the corner of his mouth, but it had remembered. He looked at Sira, an arrow in her shoulder, a bandage. She stood with a sword at her belt and looked at Aiden in a way she hadn't 11 days ago. Not stone, not ice. Something alive, warm, strong. He looked at Eden. 2 months had passed like one long march. Aiden had divided his time between 3 fronts: the capital, the bridge, and diplomacy. In the capital, May had restructured the economy. A trade agreement with Olvin was signed 12 days after Chiron's retreat. The southern pass was open to Olvin goods. Preferential tariffs were in place. Tax revenues had doubled in the first month. The peasants were returning, slowly, 1 family at a time, then 2. The fields were sown. The mills began operating. The market came to life. Prices fell. Flour was at a normal price. Salt, too. May sat in the treasury chamber, which had been cleaned out and put in order. A thick book lay before her, a quill behind her ear, An abacus. A real abacus, because Danielov's ERP system existed only in his head, but here it was parchment. She counted every copper coin. Loyalty, 52 out of 100. She told Aiden a secret. Her mother was the illegitimate daughter of the previous king. May was Aiden's cousin. She had a claim to the throne. She said this calmly, in a businesslike tone, as if reporting an interest rate. She added that she wasn't making a claim. The throne didn't interest her. The treasury was more interesting. Aiden nodded. He believed her. May counted the money, not the crowns. On the bridge, Eden was building. The wall had grown to 5 meters, the towers up to 7, a third catapult, the fourth. The moat had been widened. A drawbridge had been installed. A full-fledged fortress. Eden didn't stop. Every day brought a new blueprint, a new idea. She had found her father's blueprints, secret tunnels beneath the capital, an escape route for the royal family. She showed them to Aiden. Loyalty, 50 out of 100. The threshold. She entrusted him with her father's secret. The tunnels ran 3 miles west from the palace. The exit was in the forest beyond the city wall. Aiden inspected them. The tunnels were in good condition, dry, stone, sturdy, not just an escape route, a route for a surprise sortie, for troop movements, for supplies in the event of a siege. 6 months after the battle at the bridge, Westmark had changed. An army of 5,200 men, regular, trained, armed. Rotar commanded with the sternness of an old general and the patience of a new one. Jian trained the officer corps. 40 commanders. Each knew the drill, each knew the tactics, each knew that the king remembered his name. The Mern fortress had become a symbol. Aiden had rebuilt it into a full-fledged border stronghold. 7-meter walls, 6 towers, 8 catapults, a garrison of 200 men. Aiden was granted the title of Architect of the Crown, officially, with a seal. She didn't smile during the ceremony. But that evening, Hannah saw her sitting in her workshop, holding the scroll with her appointment in both hands, pressed to her chest. Loyalty, 83. May restructured the finances. The treasury held 40,000 gold pieces. Trade with Olven brought in 3,000 a month. New guilds, new workshops, a tax system, fair and transparent. May counted every copper coin and wouldn't let a single one be stolen. People feared her more than they feared Siru. Loyalty, 78. She became the crown treasurer. Hannah had grown even more. Her spy network covered all of Westmark and part of the neighboring territories. 120 agents. She knew every whisper in every castle. Her brother Finn had made a full recovery. He was running around the palace. He laughed. Hannah watched him from a distance. She didn't go near him. She was afraid of jinxing him. Loyalty, 60. She accepted the family medallion, an old bronze disc bearing a coat of arms. Not the Rothwells, her own. She didn't yet know she was the daughter of the Duke of the South. Aiden knew. Hannah wasn't ready. Later. Celeste worked like a diplomatic machine. 3 treaties in 6 months. Olven, a trade pact. The Duchy of Bren to the west, a non-aggression pact. And unexpectedly, the Free Cities of the North Coast, a trade league. Westmark was no longer isolated. Celeste became the voice of the crown, the official diplomatic representative. Loyalty, 85. She publicly denounced Morwayn publicly, in court, before the dukes. Morwayn was sentenced to life imprisonment, not executed. Aiden kept his word. A living traitor is more useful than a dead martyr. 2 years. 730 days since that morning when Rotor's boot struck him in the ribs. Aiden stood before the artifact and knew the answer. He didn't find it in Ken's notes, not in books, not in formulas. He found it in the registry. 3,200 names. 3,200 people he knew personally. Every name, every profession, every pain, every loyalty rating. Barney the cook, 98 out of 100. The old man no longer wept over empty cauldrons. His kitchen fed the palace and 2 garrisons. His grandson had trained under him. Lucas Verne, 84. The young gate guard became captain of the southern garrison. He got married. His daughter was born a month ago. He named her Lily, in honor of Gregor's daughter. Aldrich, 91. The blacksmith who became a colonel. His axe hung on the barracks wall like a relic. He commanded 1,000 men and knew each one by name, because he'd learned from Aiden. Derek, the baker. That boy with trembling hands by the campfire before the battle. 79. He survived. He returned to his mother and settled down. He opened a bakery, the best bread in the capital. On the sign was Westmark's stag and the inscription, Bridge Bread. 3,200 stories. 3,200 lives that changed because one day a drunken prince woke up sober and traded his ring for a sack of flour. The artifact pulsed blue, warm light, peaceful, deceptive. Over the course of 2 years, Aiden had used the system 1,000 times, thousands of drops of life. According to Ken's calculations, he had lost roughly 15 years, out of the 40 or 50 remaining to this body. If he stops all the wars, if Westmark turned out to be completely safe, the artifact would take everything he'd accumulated, all at once, and he would die. Like Ken, like the two before him. A lot had happened in 2 years. Chiron returned a year later. Valtor came in person. 3 armies, 80,000. The second war was harder than the first. Not 11 days, 4 months. The battle for the capital, a siege, a breakthrough through the Aiden tunnels, a counterattack by Jian through the southern pass, the final battle on the plain before the Mern Bridge. 15,000 Westmarkers against 50,000 Chiron, and Westmark won. Not by a miracle, calculation, logistics, the spirit of the people defending their home. Valtor retreated. The Chiron Empire cracked. Internal uprisings. Provinces fell away one after another. Olvan struck from the south. Valtor lost his throne 6 months later. He fled. He vanished. The Chiron Empire ceased to exist as a unified state. Aiden became regent of the new territories. Not a conqueror, a regent. A temporary administrator until the former Chiron provinces established their own governments. He didn't want an empire. He wanted stability. Westmark became the center of a new order on the continent, not through force, but by example. A small country that had stood its ground, that hadn't broken, that had built a future out of 20 guards and a single bowl of porridge. But the contract, the artifacts contract, hung over him like a sword. As long as the threat existed, he was alive. When the threat disappeared, he would die. And for 2 years, Aiden had been looking for a loophole. He studied Ken's records. He spoke with Jian. He went down to the artifact. He listened. He thought. And he found it. The contract had been concluded between the first king of Westmark and the architect. The terms. The architect sends a strategist. The strategist saves the kingdom. The artifact collects life force as payment. When the danger has passed, the artifact takes the remainder. The cycle repeats every 400 years. The key word, between. A contract between 2 parties, the first king and the architect. But there is a third party, the strategist. The strategist did not sign the contract. The strategist did not agree to the terms. The strategist was yanked from another world without being asked, placed into a foreign body, and they began to drain his life, without his consent. Ken didn't think about it. He accepted the rules as a given, just as a soldier accepts an order. But Daniel Coe was no ordinary soldier. He was a logistics specialist, a man who reads contracts, who looks for the fine print, who knows that any agreement without the signature of one of the parties is invalid. Aiden stood before the artifact. He placed his hand on the stone. Warm, pulsing, alive. The blue panel flashed, brighter than ever. Gold, then red, then white. A voice. Not a sound, a thought. Right inside his head. The architect. For the first time in 2 years, for the first time in 1,600 years, one of the strategists had touched the artifact. The voice was ancient, neither evil nor good, indifferent, like a river's indifference, like time's indifference. It said that Aiden had lasted longer than the others, stronger, more intriguing. It asked if he was ready to learn the price. Aiden answered aloud in the empty underground hall. He knows the price, but he won't accept it, because he didn't sign the contract. Silence. A long one. The voice said that the contract was made with the first king. Westmark agreed. All his heirs are bound by it. Aiden replied. He is not an heir. He is not Aiden Westmark.